Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba, back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back once again with another video where we're going to be discussing Marc Lamont Hill, his response to, of course, Black women seeking to what? Counsel the upcoming Hulu documentary on Freaknik. And we're going to be unpacking really what this means for the Black community, particularly Black men, that due to Marc Lamont Hill stating that what Black men are the problem. And once again, I have a special guest this evening, and that is the woman, the myth, the legend. That is the Afrocentric social worker, and we're going to put some capital letters on the none other than Monica Thomas. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing quite all right, quite all right. I'm looking to have a great conversation, intellectually stimulating conversation, and also a respectful conversation with yourself, and of course, everyone who taps in. So that is the plan. But before we get started, I have to go over the ground rules for those who are here, coming back, and those who have not watched my channel. So first and foremost, if you are unaware, here at Lumumba Speaks, we welcome diversity of thought, right? So we don't want to create an echo chamber of thought in which we are only having conversations for individuals who think like us or share our values, right? So diversity of thought is welcome, irrespective if you are a Black conservative, a Black liberal, Black nationalist, Pan-Africanist, or even right down the middle in terms of being liberal or conservative. Number two, no racial epithets of any kind can be used, none whatsoever, irrespective of one's gender, race, socioeconomic status, geographic place of origin, nationality, even one's ethnicity. I do not allow racial epithets of any kind to be used on my channel. This is a site for Black empowerment, Black power, and we know that the first end of Black power is what? Self-respect. So we will respect ourselves as African people, as Black people, and we will not engage in the use of racial epithets. Once again, facts over feelings. So if you disagree with a person's perspective, we want you to attack the argument and not the person. Once again, facts over feelings, attack the argument and not the person. And then, of course, no fundamentally false statements of any kind can or should be used when we're having this conversation. A great example would be the great debate between who's the GOAT of all, who's the GOAT, LeBron James and Michael Jordan. Hey, tomato, you could pick. But if you were to make the claim that Michael Jordan only won one championship, that would be a fundamentally false statement. And so therefore, I would cut you off. And then last but not least, here at Lumumba Speaks, our mission is neither to exonerate or vilify, but simply to challenge conventional wisdom regarding what has previously been held as fact. So with that being said, we're going to tap right in. Once again, if you're watching, the link is in the description. I will put the link in the chat momentarily. But we're talking about Marc Lamont Hill. He says that Black men are the problem in response to Black women seeking to, of course, halt the upcoming Hulu documentary on Freaknik, the annual street party in the ATL. Sister Thomas, how are you doing this evening, and what are your thoughts on this controversial topic?
I'm doing well this evening, and I like to try to center my thoughts around always bringing balance to the conversation. So I never want to take one side over the other. So my goal is to always bring clarity to maybe what the other side's perspective might be or the reasons why things happen, not necessarily taking a side, because I don't think we really get anywhere if all we're doing is trying to prove who's right and who's wrong. So I do believe we have to move past being able to kind of pinpoint who's the problem and really identify what would it take for us to be able to move forward. So in terms of Marc Lamont Hill, his comments, I do believe that it was, I think I heard someone say this when I was looking at the commentary. They said that this is very on brand for Marc Lamont Hill, and I would totally agree with that.
Very true.
So when you look at the things that he said in the past, if you listen to any of his interviews, if you listen to any of his talking points or really understand the position that he takes on issues related to men and women, he is very lenient on women, really understanding the dynamics or trying to shine a light on the dynamics that women struggle with. So I'll give him that credit. I do believe that he tries to paint a picture around all the issues that women face so that they are not marginalized in any way or discredited. I think he tries to bring Black women's voice to the forefront, because he does talk a lot about misogyny, and how Black women specifically, have been pushed out of conversations, their stories not being told, and them being controlled by men. So in that regard, I do believe that he seeks to bring that voice to the forefront, but in doing that, he does it in a way that diminishes the contribution of Black men. I think that he kind of paints with a broad brush around
Mm.
what quote unquote Black men do. I know he knows the full context of our struggle, and I don't think that he does a really good job of contextualizing that with the historical oppression that he knows that we've experienced and faced. I don't think he provides a valid or balanced argument in the things that I know that he knows that's impacting Black men and the reasons why Black men do the things that they do. So I believe that his views are very one-dimensional. And I think
Mm.
if he's going to provide balance in the conversation, which his intention might not be to provide balance, but I would like to see him provide balance because he does have such a huge platform. But I just think this is very much on brand for him.
And I would agree, right? I've heard a number of things that he stated in the past. He works in the industry. We both work in the same industry. And when we tend to have these type of conversations about Black men and Black women, what tends to happen is individuals do tend to what? Paint with a broad brush, focus
Yeah.
more on ideology and a narrative rather than what empirical data, right? Dr. C. Hassan Johnson talks about that glowingly in um, his article, Challenging the Myth of Black Male Privilege, right? So this almost is almost seems that it typically in the industry, which is higher education, if you want to move forward, you want to be someone who's able to build a career, you want to be someone who's seen as being progressive, you tend to paint with a broad brush regarding men in general, right? Particularly Black men. And we know this idea of the public abasement of Black men as inherently criminal, violent, rapist, so on and so forth, really goes back to what 19th century ethnologists, right? We saw this arise once again with Gunnar Myrdal and his seminal sociological study, An American Dilemma, right? He was brought in from one of the northern Scandinavian European countries, and all the white folk wanted to talk about was Black men want to rape white women. Black men want to rape white women, or sexually assault Black women, right? And he said, well, based on my study, I don't see any evidence of this being something that Black men want to do. And if you keep bringing it up, then maybe this is something that you are actually fascinated with. And they got upset, of course, said, take your ass back home, right? So we tend to find this. I can recall in my career, I've seen situations where individuals would paint with a broad brush and just expect you to believe them. You respect my humanity, believe me. And I'm like, I don't even believe my own children. Who the hell don't believe you, right? And then to unpack the situation, you find out the person just didn't like the guy's personality, but he didn't say or do anything that would be unbecoming. No, he talks a lot. It's like, okay, he's loquacious. He's a professor. Most professors are loquacious. They are used to lecturing and philosophizing and giving their perspective and da, 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 da. So you tend to find that this is really what takes place in the academy. This is why we tend to find a lot of men who are particularly masculine, particularly Black men, seek to not be in an academy because simply being their self, their person, the way they show up in the world is seen as what immoral, and oftentimes what I would argue inhibits the forward progress of humanity, civilization, and of course the campus community.
Yeah. I think that's a good point about higher ed, and it reminds me of the work of is it Tommy Curry?
Yes, yes, I actually have his book right behind me here. The
Yeah,
Man. Yes,
the man high. Yeah. So
yes.
it actually, yeah, I didn't get to finish his book all the way, but I did start it. But it reminds me of his work and what he talks about because he was a part of the academy before
Mm-hmm.
he moved out of the country, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it was because of this narrative that he was constantly having to challenge around really highlighting what happens to Black men and boys and not going along with that narrative within higher ed,
Mm-hmm.
that tried to paint Black men as, like you said, violent, wanting to attack Black women, not wanting, having the best interest of Black women at heart,
Mm-hmm.
undermining or not really highlighting the fact that Black men or Black boys are subjected to the same thing that Black girls are in terms of sexual violence, sexual assault at a very young age. So even the fact that he highlighted that with statistics, with literature, with data, with articles, that was still undermined in the academy. And he talks a lot about that within his work. So I think that kind of proves what you're saying when you try to bring that balance, how much pushback you get with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And some would argue that, of course, higher education really promotes this concept of weaponizing victimhood, right? That's a conversation that's taking place today to where, and so oftentimes, even when I've had conversations with people regarding some of the studies that they're doing, I always ask the question, well, are you making a space for agency and self-determination, right? Because there's a big push for feminist theory. Patricia Hill Collins, of course, is one of the preeminent Black feminist theorists, right? We know that her seminal text came out 30-some years ago. Black Feminists. I actually have a copy of the 30th anniversary edition. So shout out to her, right? But what she talks about in her text is what? Having agency in a matrix of domination. But we don't hear that in these conversations. So once again, when we talk about balance, when it comes to conversations, particularly in which Black men are seen as the problem, right? And we're not talking about Adrian the Problem Broner out of Cincinnati, right? We're talking about Black men in general. This tends not to be the case. And then we have to look at the social and economic ramifications that Black men face in terms of facing higher levels of employment discrimination based on the fact there's the belief that they will be inherently violent if something doesn't go their way on the job. There's actually data, particularly what Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, that substantiates these claims that are being made. So something to really unpack. If you're watching, make sure you hit the thumbs up button, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, the notification bell. Make sure you subscribe. I'm going to put the link in the chat, in the comment section. And then we'll have you all tap in, be part of the conversation. And once again, the link is also in the description. And we're discussing, Marc Lamont Hill says that Black men are the problem. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play the clip. Hopefully I don't get a strike on my channel, but I'm going to play the clip where he's discussing his views of what's taking place with Freaknik and what the real issue is, as opposed to what many people are talking about, of course, this issue regarding Black women not wanting to be seen in a less than flattering light. So let's pull that up here. Let me see, I got a comment here. He's an agent. So Def Null says he's an agent. Okay. So listen, I want you to tap in and substantiate that claim and let us know why you believe Marc Lamont Hill is an agent. So I don't have a problem with you making that claim, brother or sister, but I want you to tap in and share with us why you believe that is the case. So
with facts, data, something that can be substantiated and supported.
Absolutely. Because I can understand why you feel that way, but I want you to tap in and really just unpack why you believe that is the case. Now, I would argue based on his talking points and what Sister Monica stated in terms of him being on brand, that he may not be interested in what is in the best interest of the Black community, right? I think when people are actually interested in the best interest of the Black community, Black people as a whole, they tend to bring balance to the conversation where we can argue, we could talk about the external issues, the external enemy in our community, some of the internal issues, internal enemies in our community, and what leads us to engaging in what oftentimes is considered racially disempowering, self-defeating, and self-destructive behavior. Right, but we do know that oftentimes, if you want to climb that ladder, it's almost commonplace that you throw not only Black men but oftentimes Black people under the bus. So something to consider. But let's watch this.
Of noise is being made about this Freaknik documentary. A whole bunch of people talking about whose names and faces and voices and bodies are going to show up on this video from the 90s. And most of the conversation is about whether or not women will be exposed on this documentary, whether people's mamas and girlfriends and wives and daughters are going to show up in a Freaknik documentary. And I hear you, but that's the wrong issue. Look, I was outside in the 90s. I've been to Freaknik as an aspiring young journalist covering the story, of course. And when I was there, I saw what was happening. It's not just about women being half naked. It's not about women's hypersexuality. No, Freaknik is about men ogling, men fondling. Freaknik had a lot to do with male hypermasculinity and sexual violence. Freaknik is a rape fest. It is a sexual assault fest. That's not the only thing going on out there. I'm not trying to demonize or pathologize Black people, but if we're talking about the worst parts of Freaknik, it wasn't about the actions of women. It was about the disgusting actions of us men. And so when you watch Freaknik, you don't need to be worried about mama, daughter, sister, girlfriend. You need to be worried about brother, son, husband, or yourself, and whether or not you were engaged in some of the worst parts of patriarchal culture, whether you were part of the worst parts of rape culture and misogyny and sexual violence. When we talk about Freaknik and the way we talk about Freaknik, It's a representation of all the problems we have in a society that always blames women for the actions of men. So don't check the women, check yourself.
So
that's hard to listen to.
I'm sorry.
I said that's hard to listen to.
It is. So
It's so disingenuous.
Yes. I mean, because he starts off saying it was a sexual assault fest, but then says that's not all that was going on there. Right. So like you're talking out both sides of your mouth. But once again, we see this issue. I don't want to pathologize Black people, but then you're pathologizing Black people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you watch something like this, one, you got to think of who is he speaking to? Who is his target audience? What message is he trying to deliver to that target audience? What are his talking points? And then you have to see like this dichotomy that he sets up between men and women. How he brought to the surface what the concerns of women were, but then he said, well, don't worry, that's not where our focus needs to be. That's not what we need to pay attention to. We need to focus on patriarchy. So he sets up this, he kind of juxtaposes these two ideas. He presents the one, but then he slams in and targets the other as if we can minimize this one over here, but we have to pay special attention to what Black men are doing. And again, to what I was saying before, if this is his effort to kind of highlight and bring forward the voice of Black women, I tend to think Black women do a really good job of amplifying our own voices. I don't know that we need a Marc Lamont Hill to bring our voices or our problems to the forefront. They didn't need Marc Lamont Hill to initiate the lawsuit or the suing around this documentary. They didn't need his voice to do that. So I don't believe that he has to position himself as the voice for Black women. I'm sure Black women might appreciate it, but I don't know that he has to position himself in that way to make a point.
And I think something that I find rather curious is the fact that he's supposed to be speaking up for Black women and sitting in solidarity with them, but he's also, in doing that, he's dismissing what their concerns are. Right. So it's one thing if Black women said, listen, our concern is the fact that we were being sexually assaulted and this was rape culture, sexual assault culture, fest, so on and so forth. Cool. But the fact that Black women are stating, we don't want this documentary released because we believe it puts us in a bad light. This was a time where we were young, we were in college, and we wanted to have fun, get drunk, so on and so forth. We've all been to a party maybe once or twice in our early 20s, right? Like I stated before, I went to Mardi Gras when I was 18. Right. Yeah. And if I say to listen, I don't want the documentary from Mardi Gras coming out in 2002 because I was on Bourbon Street doing God knows what with God knows who, or God knows what time of the day. Right. And then someone says, well, we're here for Brother Bakari, but the real issue is the fact that he was drugged. It's not, like I said, it comes off as disingenuous. And once again, seeking to invalidate what women are saying to promote your own issue or cause. So I think that's something to consider as well. Brother Kenyatta.
How you doing, bro? Yeah, I was trying to unmute. Hey, it's been a minute. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right. I'm grinding. I'm going to be locked in the library tomorrow to finish the first 3 chapters. Well, chapter 3 of my dissertation. Get that sent off.
All right.
And then I got to defend that, and then we're going to go from there. But I've been doing all right.
All right. And I'm well. And Monica, good evening to you as well.
Hi, good evening. Doing? I'm doing
well. And you don't know Sister Monica, but she is the Afrocentric social worker. So make sure you go to MonicaThomas.com and check out everything that she's doing.
Let me make a note of that. Looking forward. And I know you don't care what my position, my 2 cents on it.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't know if you watched the video, right? But Marc Lamont Hill, he comes out, he says, basically,
I saw it.
Okay, right. So
I saw it before I chimed in.
Okay. So this is the conversation we're having. In the video, as you know, he states he doesn't want to pathologize Black people, but then he pathologizes Black people, right? He doesn't want to move.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. And I don't really agree with or align with Marc's centrist liberal establishment, liberal status quo ideology or politics, but he didn't say what you said he said. He did not say Black men are the problem. And I don't know if that was just something to bring people in, but that's not what he said.
So how would you unpack what he said?
Well, the way I interpret it is I think it's unfortunate because we live in the United States. We were born into this alien culture. It is a patriarchal culture. It is a sexist culture. And here you are, you have a documentary coming out that has the potential to display a number of issues. And it is part of the continuance of patriarchy, where you have two potential exposures in this video. You have one, women being sexually promiscuous, or in a more liberal sense, sexually liberated, as they called it, being sensual, sexual, out in public, twerking, exposing their bodies. And then you have another side where there are legitimate crimes, legitimate objectification, and abuse of women. And the men who did the abuses and even committed potential crimes are less concerned about the harm that could do to them than the women are concerned about their reputations and their careers for showing a little.
Hold on.
Allow me to see.
Very quickly, because you made a statement. You said that the man who
I didn't finish the statement, but go off.
You stated that the men who are. I just want to start off by saying I don't support anyone who's engaged in sexual assault. So if you engage in sexual assault, what the consequences you get are the consequences you get. But you said that the individuals that engage in these behaviors or are alleged to engage in these behaviors are less concerned with them being exposed or what have you, rather than the women being seen in a negative light for what they would consider
based on
deviant behavior. So I'm saying, where are you getting that from?
Based on my very limited, I never attended Freaknik, but I'm very familiar. I came up in the 80s too. I graduated high school in 92 and went straight to college. And I'm very familiar with Black Beach Week, Black Bike Week, Freaknik, and all of the stuff that was going on every summer throughout my entire college career, including West Indian Day Parade. And a lot of times, I was more attracted to the culturally oriented get downs and kickbacks, and I was more attracted to those that had more of a cultural slant than those that were strictly about Black Spring Break and all that. Right. So I'm very familiar with the atmosphere at the time. But what I'm speaking from is both the legitimate concerns and the ongoing memes and critiques, and even the humorous part of it, the various people making jokes and things. What I'm seeing is everyone's talking about, I've seen several memes where this is y'all mama and the woman spread out on top of the cars, and women, scantily clad, thongs, naked, a lot of the hotel room sessions, running trains. What I've been observing is that the main concerns are women who are now our age, my age, because I'm a little older than you, I think.
Yes, you are.
So my peers,
right.
My wife, and my peers, women that are my peers, women I went to high school and college with, are concerned that many of them are professionals. My wife is a professor, and I have women who are lawyers and things of that nature who had a life before we had kids. My wife had a whole life before she met me, and me and my wife had a whole life before our sons were born. But I've been hearing that there is a lot of alarm that the women have, because they feel that being exposed by this documentary could harm their standing or status in the community, their standing or status within the church, their careers, and their careers, where I have not heard and I have not seen amongst the Black community, amongst men who are my peers, some of my friends who went to Freaknik, some of my friends who I saw with my own eyes engage in some salacious behavior right in front of me. I ain't calling no names, but I haven't heard the men saying, oh, I don't want to be seen out there with my rippling muscles under my tank top or with my shirt out, or I don't want to be seen out there, with a 40 and a blunt. I haven't heard the men being afraid of being exposed. And the fact that men and the fact that the men were out there being sexual, being expressive, being loose, being sexually liberated. I haven't heard the men articulate that they were worried about being exposed because, being a hoe, being a freak.
But you stated But hold on, you stated that there wasn't a concern not for being exposed for engaging in salacious behavior. You stated they weren't afraid of being exposed for engaging in sexual.
Yeah, I haven't. Well, yes, going off of Mark,
that's the issue that I was focused.
The truth is, there was a lot of that going on, right?
Oh yeah, I know there was sexual.
There was a lot of that going on, and that is a bigger problem than a man showing his rippling muscles or a woman showing some wearing a thong and a string bikini. So we're hearing about, oh, your mama gonna get exposed as a hoe, and we're not really hearing the dialogue about, well, there was a lot of inappropriate shit going on, and at that same time, we don't love these hoes, bald head hoes, bust down, the bitch that I hate. Remember that song? That was a hit song. Oh well, it's the radio version is The Girl That I Hate by Poison Clan.
But I've never heard.
We know that misogyny. And a lot of guys my age, every single time a brother my age want to step up and talk about these face tat rappers, these new age rappers, I always have to remind them, you know, to a kid looking up to me, life ain't nothing but bitches and money. Ice Cube, who's now an elder statesman and an entrepreneur and a role model. And when Snoop Dogg was just asked less than a year ago, do you regret all these things that you said and promoted? He said, I don't regret one word of it. And people were praising him for standing 10 toes down. So yes, I agree that it should be a bigger issue and people should be talking about the behavior that we gave rise to in that culture, in that era that is now being turned against us and that is coming back to bite us. That should be a bigger issue than some rippling muscles and some thongs, men exposing themselves, women exposing themselves. I think a bigger issue would be the assaults, the dehumanization, the objectification that was going on then, that those same people I know now, and if I have to name names, I think I will, people that are now standing up as pillars and moral authorities, condemning these young people killing each other. These young people don't have no self-respect. These young girls. And I know a lot of brothers that were condemning WAP and these sisters. Right, and them same dudes had the Little Kim hardcore poster up on their dorm room walls. Right.
So, but once again, in bringing balance, right?
Yes.
On having balance. As I stated before, we talked about the last show. We talked about Freaknik went downhill when they Uncle Luke and the two live crew were invited. That's when
you got to be up the hill before you go down the hill.
No, seriously. In terms of the literature on Freaknik, this is what's being reported, that it went downhill once, I think it was maybe 93, when a community group, not the group that was part of the student group on campus at the AU, and franchised it, right, copyrighted it, and then of course invited them, and then that's when we started to see the debauchery take place. What we do know is, unfortunately, because I've gone to Mardi Gras when I was 18, that we tend to find both men and women engaging in these type of behaviors, going up, groping people, so on and so forth. Which is extremely unfortunate, right? I know because I was there. I was 18, right? And I was groped. I had these things happen, right?
Yeah, I've been groped. Right.
Yes. So hold on. So Deb says Lamont Hill has a habit of portraying that this behavior is only from Black men. That's the issue. Like white men don't have keg parties. And we understand that, but we want to have the conversation about the Black community because, of course, this is about Black people, Black Empowerment Initiative. But I understand what you're saying. There have been people who have made the argument of well, what about the Girls Gone Wild videos, so on and so forth. And I think this is similar to when people were saying, and Tariq Nasheed came out when they was going after Cosby and going after R. Kelly. Well, he can try to come out with the First Them movement. Now, here's the thing. I don't believe in providing cover for anyone who engages in sexual assault. So I wouldn't say First Them. I would say everybody together. Right? You know what I'm saying? They got to first go after them.
Can you jog my memory? Is the Tariq Nasheed, the man you're referring to, is that the man that said Black women had it easier in slavery than Black women? The guy that said Black women had an easier time in slavery than a Black man because they could give up some pussy and get their way, where Black men didn't have that option.
Right.
You're talking about the Tariq Nasheed that was a pimp that sold himself as a pimp and wrote several books on how to manipulate and exploit women. That's who you're. I just wanted to be reminded of who calling on as authorities.
So I think we see this type of, whenever there are individuals who are engaging in what behavior that we would argue is unbecoming, we say, well, white men do it too. We don't care about what white people do. We're interested in what's in the best interest of our community, right? I've gone to numerous parties when I was a young man and never engaged in sexually assaulting anyone. In fact, I was telling my son, because I talked to him about not being with a woman when she's intoxicated. And he said, well, how were you able to do that? I said, luckily for me, I never found a drunk woman attractive. It was always a huge turnoff. So that was never an issue for me. Right? So, but I just take issue with people saying, well, first down, because in my mind, that means you're trying to provide protection and cover for individuals that you know are engaging in sexual assault, male or female.
Right.
But not, and of course, I'm not a fan of that at all. I think we need to divorce our community as much as possible from that type of.
But can I say one more thing though? Especially with this, men are also assaulted. I agree, but we have to take responsibility for the fact that Black men, I've had family members and ancestors who were men and who were victims of ongoing domestic violence and assault. But amongst men, I had said when R. Kelly was first convicted, and a lot of brothers and R. Kelly's detractors were making prison rape jokes. And I said that making prison rape jokes about that would somehow be karma or appropriate vengeance or something appropriate for R. Kelly to be subjected to. I said that perpetuates rape culture. And the brothers were coming at me very hard. I know brothers mock, oh, you let a woman put your hands on you. So I believe that Black men should speak out about how the assaults we suffer, the objectification, the dehumanization, especially, and the hypersexualization of Black men in this society, how it's done. We should challenge it outside as it is imposed on us. But we also have to have a lot of dialogue on how we treat each other and how we define manhood and masculinity in terms of when a brother does become a victim, how many other of his own peers, his own family members will see him as less than a man or for speaking out, let alone just for being a victim and then for speaking out. And I hate this guy's guts for a number of reasons. But that one
word, but
yeah. Not for me, man. I'm a hater innovator, I'm not just a hater spectator. I'm a hater participator. Nobody's greater. I indulge in hate. I think hate is necessary and appropriate in this system and institutions. But beyond that,
we have to agree to disagree on that. But go ahead. You were gonna quote somebody. You was gonna
Terry Crews.
Oh, okay.
Terry Crews. And when Terry Crews came out about his sexual assault, several prominent Black men mocked him, demeaned him, even challenged him, threatened to assault him for being assaulted when he tried to defend himself.
I saw him threatening to assault other Black men.
That's another issue too. Right.
They were threatening to assault him.
That was who was that?
Who was that? Terry Crews, but
what did he say? Yeah, he told, I think it was D.L. Hughley.
Yeah, he was like, well, I would beat you up. And D.L. Hughley said, well, you should have did that to the guy who sexually assaulted.
Right.
Instead of trying to
right. And then 50 Cent. Exactly. So I fully agree that Black men have some of the highest rates of abuse and the sex amongst demographics on the male side. I worked in a prison for 3 years. And it was even within the prison. So I do agree. And I think that as we begin to articulate and let the world know that this is an issue that we will no longer tolerate, I do think there's a lot of very difficult internal dialogues that Black men will have to have as well.
Absolutely.
If I could chime in. I agree with what you're saying. And when I speak about having balance, that what you said would have been a narrative that I would have wanted for Marc Lamont Hill to have pushed forward instead of the way he did it. Now, I know he might have, I don't know, authorities that he might have to answer to. I don't really know the politics of the griot where he's, shooting his show there. But I do think in terms of balance, we absolutely have to have a conversation around the types of men are the types of boys that are turning into men in our communities and what we're teaching them as they matriculate through that process. So I believe that there's time and space for that. And I do believe that we need to do the same thing on the side of young girls who are matriculating into becoming women. So I don't think that there's no shortage of learning and deprogramming and unlearning that needs to take place within our community. I think what concerns me is the narrative centered around it. The fact that we don't provide context for it, and we take on some of those terms and narratives, for example, rape culture. Like, I think that's a very problematic narrative to use when you talk about a group of people who have been systemically oppressed, and when you need to provide context around what constitutes rape. Why do people rape? What happened to boys who rape? What happened to women who have been raped? Like, there's a lot of context that needs to be in. Bakar, you might have to edit this because I know the R word is something that YouTube doesn't typically like, so you might want to pay attention to that.
We can say sexual assault moving forward.
Okay, sexual assault. So with that, I think it's important for us to, one, provide context, and then have a balance around why is this happening in our community and what we need to do to educate our children around what it means, how to look for it, the language to use around it, and how to be empathetic to the fact that it happens in our communities every day.
I would agree with that. Like I stated, I went to Mardi Gras when I was 18. I went to Black Beach when I was 18 in Mississippi. And I think you have a group of people who engage in that type of behavior. You have a group of people who were engaged in what some people call degenerate behavior, right? And then you have a group of people who are just there to have a good time, right? And then you have a group of people there who are focused more on the cultural aspect, right? Like the West Indian Day Parade in New York. So I think great culture, as Brother Depp has stated, is a bit of a stretch, and I think it's rooted in painting a broad brush, because I would argue that in order for it to be part of culture, the majority of people would have to be engaging and supporting and providing cover for the individuals who are engaging in that type of behavior. I think, and for example, and this is, go right ahead.
No, I don't want to interrupt you. I just
right, and I can state this, of course, working in higher education, I know of numerous examples of women, irrespective of their race, being highly inebriated, someone attempting to sexually assault them, and black male undergraduates, co-eds, saying, "Hey, what's going on here? What are you doing?" So on and so forth, right? So they kind of paint this picture that this is an issue of Black men engaging in patriarchy. Like I said, I think it's a bit disingenuous, right? I do. I think it's a bit disingenuous. But to your point about the griot, some have made the argument that the politics of the griot are about publicly shaming, speaking ill of Black men. I mean, there was an article that came out a couple of years ago entitled "Black Men Are the White People of the Black Race."
Oh, right? I remember that.
Yeah, so some people would argue that if this is what comes out of the griot, that they're going to take this position in which they view Black men as actually antithetical, their presence, right, in the Black community is antithetical to the forward progress of the Black community.
And I think if I could just go really quickly, I think that this could be an opportunity for us to really look at the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 videos from the griot, the last 10 articles that they've put forth as it relates to the culture, and really see where their politics lies. And then you'll have a good indication on whether or not they're actually for helping Black men and painting an accurate narrative around Black men and the reasons why they do the things that they do, or the problems in the community. I don't think we could take sound bites and kind of digest, fully what their politics are. But if you were to research what types of articles do they promote, what types of talking points do you see, what types of videos are you seeing on their YouTube channel, you'll have a good indication on the narrative that they're trying to push.
And Brother Depp says, Jamel Hill, I'm sorry, Depp, I don't know if you're a brother or sister, but the link is in the chat. Hope you could tap in, be part of the conversation. Once again, the link is in the description. You're watching Lumumba Speaks. Make sure you hit the like button, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. We're talking about Marc Lamont Hill and his response to, of course, Black women seeking to cancel the Freaknik documentary coming out on Hulu.
Well, there are several things I wanted to touch on. I think that the U.S. systems and institution of global white hegemony, the racist system that we are subjected to, the economy of capitalism, and this oligarchical governance that we have, rape culture is a component of that. We live under a rape culture. And as you define rape, you know, basic.
Sexual assault.
Oh, I'm sorry, sexual assault culture. But that is a thing, you know. It exists, and we are all subject to it. We are all under it, and we should all do what we can to oppose it. And I don't think it's something as, what do you mean? Give it an example of rape culture,
of sexual assault culture.
I'm sorry, damn. All right. Well, let's just even say SA. For SA, right?
Yeah.
That is from the origins of this country, SA was used against to dehumanize, to psychologically break, and to force the reproduction for the profits of the elites.
Facts.
That has happened for much of this country's legislative and policy history. Men had the right to SA their wives, and women had no legal recourse. Through the contract of marriage, women were obligated to service their husbands without any legal recourse and without the ability. They did not have the legal ability to withdraw consent.
Facts.
So that SA has been legislated in this society. We also know from prosecution versus the criminal statistics in terms of the amount of SAs that happen in this country versus the level of prosecution or investigation. We have the previous president of the United States is currently under a civil trial for a person that he SA'd.
No, I think it's criminal. Isn't it criminal?
No, I think it's a civil case. I think the what they call, Lord have his mercy, the statute of limitations. The current president is on tape being highly inappropriate
with young girls.
The father, the godfather of hip hop, or grandfather, Africa Bambaataa. And yet his name is still ringing out. Many prominent black leaders of various cults. Black cults.
Is a good example of that.
And Eldridge Cleaver.
Yes. Yep.
And what's his name? Dr. Malachi Z. York. Minister Louis Farrakhan is on record justifying men attacking, or what he said, bothering their daughters because their mothers do not provide enough satisfaction and support for the men. And so blaming the mothers for men targeting their daughters with SA. So you cannot tell me one element of this culture, the media, entertainment, the politics, the economics, and the number one orientation for the United States is warfare. And if you read certain social scientists, Derek Jensen mainly is the one who most recently wrote about this. SA, systematic SA, has always been a cornerstone of warfare. And the United States has been in perpetual war. And whether you go to Guantanamo Bay, whether you go to Abu Ghraib prison in the so-called Middle East, whether you go to Haiti and the Haitian relief projects from the UN, every single major conflict and major aid, police action, and rescue effort has been infused. So wherever you find capitalism, white hegemony, colonization, you find that SA is an integral part of that. And like I said, Tariq Nasheed, who is cultivating himself a cult of personality, who is becoming one of the most prominent, like every black person in the United States, from his shitty documentaries, Hidden Colors, to his African-American, and Brother Polite.
Yeah, that's a great example, yes. Where it reminded me, because this has been a while, but he was accused of, if I remember correctly, of SAing maybe a girlfriend's children. And there are still people supporting this.
Pending case. Exactly.
Still supporting. This is unbelievable. Now, I'm going to say this because people may say, well, you're getting high on your horse. People who know me personally know I had a very close family member just went to prison for 15 years for SA of a child. And when I found this out, I almost caught a homicide myself.
So, to say all that.
So this is a situation of me trying to be high on my horse. Like, I take issue with this.
Yes, I've lost a friend due to his inappropriate behaviors and engagements and interaction with women and girls. A childhood friend whom I lost. Well, this is, I guess it's, I'm digging up picking at old wounds. This is over a decade ago. But like you said, when I found out, I got the facts, I took appropriate action. But there's a lot of people still supporting and kicking it and supporting individuals, family members, and so on and so forth.
I remember I told him, I said, look, if I found out you did this, I would testify against you myself.
So my point is, SA culture has infused every segment of the dominant society, and it's also infused the subcultures and the victims of that culture through our maladaptations, our attempts to integrate and mimic our oppressors. We too have to do this. And the one thing that when you have a contamination or a sickness, the worst thing you can do is to deny it. The second worst thing you can do is misdiagnose it. So that's something we have to acknowledge and confront. If there was no material, I'm me. I don't believe shit. I need evidence and I need a reasoned, rational argument. Rape culture is a thing. And as the sister says, balance. I agree with balance. But to achieve balance, that also requires us to take certain systematic steps. First, you have to realize the source of the imbalance and recognize and acknowledge the source of the imbalance. Because a lot of times when we call for balance, that rebalancing of the scale, and that's not just for things internally for Black people, but let's just take balancing the budget. When the Republicans say, oh, we want to balance the budget. If you don't properly acknowledge the source of the imbalance, you can cause more harm than good through the process of rebalancing. So if I say I want to balance the budget, the U.S. economy is in balance. And how do we balance the budget? We cut across the board. Even though the imbalance was caused by tax cuts to the wealthy elites, but you're cutting programs for the poor in order to balance. So first thing we have to do is identify the source of the imbalance. Secondly, you have to engage in a balancing method that does not punish those who are not responsible for the imbalance. Because when there is a societal level imbalance, whenever the balances are made, that's a whole societal shift. It will impact the people who had nothing to do with creating the imbalance, and it will impact the people who did everything or are fully responsible for the imbalance. So as we begin to balance the scales, and a lot of times balance comes, well, brothers are victims too. The sisters ain't the only victims. So a lot of people really do think, well, we have to, since the brothers, the assaults and the essays that men endure, the domestic violence that men endure, the pandemic, the epidemic of prison essay that has been mocked in media, that even to this day, that's probably the only form of essay that you can still safely mock without anybody calling you out. Don't drop the soap. I just heard a modern comic do a don't drop the soap thing. It's everywhere. You both know exactly what I mean. It's not a person that's listening to us that doesn't know what I mean when I say don't drop the soap.
Absolutely.
Now, but if I made, but just allow me to finish this point. But the solution, that there is an imbalance in not acknowledging the assaults males deal with and the acknowledgement of the assault. Because if I got up and said, "Ooh, I saw when Rick Ross came out and said I'm gonna drug this woman and take her home and enjoy that," immediate response. But if Rick Ross was like, "Yeah, he doing 10 to 9 in the pen, better not drop the soap," it would have went totally unchallenged. So, but we don't balance the scales to say, well, we got to neglect women more, or we got to reduce the acknowledgement or reduce the voices of women calling this shit out in order to enhance our voices. We have to balance the scale in such a way that the women and what they go through is still elevated and articulated and challenged, and the men, what's happening to all of us, so that it's not even a gendered issue, because any form of it, no matter who you're assaulting, who you're exploiting, who you're preying on, because it happens a lot. Another form that's neglected is elder SA. I worked in healthcare, and elderly people with Alzheimer's and other cognitive issues suffer quite a bit of SA.
I agree, but I want to say this when we talk about balance is because I'm not one that tries to get into that, because we know what tends to happen is we get this oppression Olympics, and now people are trying to fight and debate over who's got it worse rather than focusing on how do we solve these problems, right? This is something that tends to happen on a regular basis in higher education. I know because I've worked in the industry for over 10 years. But the bigger issue when we talk about violence is this broad brush that's painted when people make these claims, or this is what men do, or this is what men do, and this is da-da-da-da. That's when it tends to be extremely problematic. I know because I recall when I first started my doctoral program, this was the type of language that was used. And I said, well, hey, you're talking about me here, and I don't engage in that type of behavior, nor does anyone that I associate with. So what are we talking about? Right? I can recall being in class. We were having an intellectual debate. I provided a dissenting opinion, and I provided receipts. And then the professor says, well, you know, Black women suffer violence at the hands of Black men. And I said, well, one, unfortunately nowadays, I wish it didn't take place at all. Domestic violence is what? Bidirectional in nature, right? The data even substantiates that. But I said, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And you're making that statement because you thought it would shut me up, right? And so we tend to find this type of the lack of balance, and of course, castigating Black men is inherently violent, irrespective of where you are, what type of behavior you're engaged in, whatever, irrespective of what your values are. And the issue is now that you have individuals who that don't engage in this behavior, or may even be allies, supporters of trying to stop this type of behavior taking place, being seen as what nefarious, and this can have what social and economic ramifications. So that's why when I talk about balance, I don't believe in painting with a broad brush regarding anyone.
And I will say too, when we speak about culture, I agree with a lot of what you said, and I appreciate you laying that out, you know, so people can really see what you were saying in terms of how the evolution of that has impacted our culture as Black people, and how that with us being minority culture within the dominant society, how we're susceptible to a lot of the things that they do. But I do think along with that conversation, we have to understand that everything that the dominant culture and dominant society does within our culture, we have some things that we say absolutely not. Like, this is not who we are. This is not what we do. So even when we're in the context of what they do and how they run their families and the way that they speak to each other, the way that they interact, we still have a set of values and a set of principles that oftentimes guide our behavior, and some deal breakers, some absolutely not, we don't do this, we don't do that. That's not who we are. So we have to acknowledge the fact that everything that they do, we don't take all of that on. So if we don't take on all the things that they do, then we have to understand when it happens within our community, what's happening that's driving those behaviors, what's happening with our men, with our women, and our children, to where those things are so prominent in our community. And for the majority of people within our community, I know that that's not something that we see as acceptable or okay. We just don't bring it to the forefront and hold people accountable within our communities to say, don't talk to Uncle Joe, don't talk to such and such. We provide sometimes cover for those people within our community and don't hold them accountable. So we know that things like that are happening. We've just not developed the structure and the communication and the conversation to say what needs to happen within our community. I don't believe that we have a culture of SA within the community. I believe the majority of Black people know that it's not okay, know that I understand what you're saying, though, but let
me ask you this question, Nika.
You know,
I think you're making a good point, but why then are people providing cover for these individuals? This is something I don't understand. Why?
And can I add to that question?
Yeah.
In the just up into the 70s, the white dominant culture imposed the death penalty for SA. Everybody on the surface, anybody you ask Donald Trump, who is a predator, he's against it. I mean, simply Black people on the surface saying we're against it. You know, Europeans say they aren't against it. They outlaw it. They impose harsh penalties for it. But the proof is in the pudding. So, yeah, there's a lot of rhetoric. And it's just like saying, well, capitalism is about merit and working hard, or the United States is about democracy and freedom. And it's the rhetoric is there on both sides. But the stats, the suffering, the millions of exploited and targeted vulnerable people say that our community has as much problem. I wish there was a element or an aspect of Black culture that had zero tolerance for this, but I see that we are fully contaminated with the Western patriarchal.
There is an element. There is an element. Like I said, like me and Monica and I, we're from the same city. The circles we run in, it would become hell or high water for someone that we knew to have engaged in this behavior, and we not do everything we can to bring this person to justice. So I'm just being honest here, right? This is the reality, and Sister Monica can speak to that.
Yeah. So to go along with the question that you just asked, when you said, we might not believe in it in terms of our rhetoric, meaning we say we don't believe it, but in terms of the percentages, how frequently it happens in our community, the types of people who are going to jail for those offenses, you would think when you look at the data, you would say, oh, we don't care about that. Children aren't important to us. Mm-hmm. We have no boundaries around what we believe should be acceptable behaviors in our families. I think you can look at the numbers and you can easily come to that conclusion. But then when you dig a little bit further and dig deeper and you ask, who gave you the language to determine what SA means in your family? If this were to happen, what is a safe space that you feel that you can go to let someone know that this happened? If this happened to you and your mother or your father doesn't believe you, where do you go to get support? Like, we have to look at the fact that there's no infrastructure set up to have these types of conversations. So that leaves our community vulnerable to not be able to say anything and not to speak out. So I don't know that we can have this conversation without equally looking at what is set up within our community for us to really be able to deal with this psychologically, emotionally, mentally, what it does for our families. If your husband is the primary breadwinner in your family, and you find out that he's sexually assaulting SA and your daughter, what is the mom? What is her recourse? Where does she go for help? Where does she go for support? I think we got to think of all of those dynamics that
I appreciate that, and I do think that we do need to come up with ways of challenging it. But that's not my point. My point is that we live under and we participate in a rape culture. That's the foundation. As we say, well, how do we confront it? How do we challenge it? How do we dismantle it? How do we protect vulnerable individuals in our community? How do we deal with perpetrators and predators in our community? Those are all valid questions we need to answer and we need to work on. But the fundamental understanding is these behaviors are not alien to our community. They're not something that just some insidious outsiders come and bring to our community. Due to our time within this culture and the way we have navigated this culture, it is now a part of our community. It is a problem that we have. And one of the biggest sources of that, I have concluded, is the religious community. You hear a lot of talk about the LGBTQ and drag queen and all that nonsense, protect the babies. But the largest, most entrenched institution that provides cover and that I conclude provides psychological motivations and justifications for the behavior is the Black church, and to a lesser degree, because of the smaller population, the Black mosque and mass.
Oh, absolutely. I was having a conversation with a brother from West Africa, and we talked about how growing up, you go to these Quranic schools where you have to memorize the Quran from front to back, write the whole Quran in Arabic, even if you don't even know what it means that you're reading or what you're reciting, and how sexual essay is prevalent there, right? In those institutions. We also talk about Jehovah's Witnesses. I lost a friend, right, who was a Jehovah's Witness. And I was having this conversation and said, okay, but they provide cover. This is documented, so on and so forth. Stormed out my house, never spoke to him again, right? So very quickly, Def, Nos, I hope you can really tap in and be part of the conversation. The link is in the chat. I put the link in the chat once again. But Def says the vast majority of Black people condemn SA. Communication and programs should be put in place to protect our people. It's not just the church, it's the government too. So we need you to tap in and be part of the conversation. I'm gonna put the link in the chat. If you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Make sure you hit the notification bell.
As far as the vast majority of the community, R. Kelly, I live on the south side of Chicago. Mm-hmm. Just a few years ago when I was dropping off my sons and picking them up for school when they were younger, I'd see R. Kelly cruising through the community in luxury cars, and his victims.
Hang out at the McDonald's on the south side and try to pursue young girls.
Just a few blocks.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Just a few blocks from my house, the Hyde Park McDonald's.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I wish what he said. Tariq Nasheed is going to Texas, and thousands of people are going to give him thousands of dollars. So I wish the community. It's not even. Not only does it just. I wish this rhetoric about we don't stand for this in our rhetoric. But when it comes, like the sister suggested, when we start to think protecting our children versus protecting our financial status, our income, protecting our good family names, there's a lot of shit we are willing to protect over our children or other vulnerable targeted people in our community. And there's a lot of people who we know collectively or individually that engage in predatory behavior or just articulate predatory rhetoric. Cosby can go to any black community right now and be a draw and have a ticker tape parade. So I wish what he said, well, we don't play that shit. Yeah, we play that shit. And I'm not one to tear down my people, but all I'm saying is I do think the vast majority of the black people are not predatory and do not support this, but there is not enough understanding, comprehension, empathy, sympathy, and organization around this. There's not enough. Well, yeah. So I just want that 98% of black people who don't get down with that shit to let that reflect in their day-to-day actions and behavior.
And I would say
the music they consume, the products they consume, the circles and social circles that they keep. And let me tell you, if our community wasn't like that.
No, you can't overtalk me. You said products. Could you give some examples of the products that people consume that support SA culture?
Yeah. There's trips to Dubai, all the passport bros. So one of the products that consume is international travel that feeds predation.
People have been traveling internationally for eons.
Yes, they have. But I didn't say people traveling internationally. Hell, last year I just got back, got another stamp on my passport. Beautiful trip with my wife and son. I'm not talking about that. I said passport bros.
Okay. And
that is a very particular motivation for travel. That is a very particular community that advocates. And you can go to YouTube right now and find videos of men in the Dominican Republic, men in Brazil, and other so-called third world impoverished countries,
developing nations,
telling other black men what are the best countries, and within those countries, what are the best strips, what are the best night scenes, what are the best in order to take advantage of the poverty and instability in those countries in order to gain sexual advantage or take sex. We know sex tourism, and that used to be a white thing. Mm-hmm. And the places like Dubai, where a lot of our celebrities like Will Smith is an unofficial spokesman and works with the travel agencies of the United Arab Emirates. And the United Arab Emirates is a hotbed of sexual predation, sex slavery, sex trafficking, and all those things. Just look it up. And there are women's organizations that are saying underage girls. And at the same time, the underbelly and the brothers are talking about E40, just about any prominent black male.
E40, what about E40?
E40, look up his travels and his relationships to Dubai. These brothers on there. I don't know what he was doing, but what I'm saying is when you have a country that is literally established in an underground black economy that runs off of slave labor, and that is literally the hotbed. I mean, I could just pull it up. I've discussed this on my radio show, and they came back to the surface again. What's his name? The little comic guy, Kevin Hart.
Okay.
All these prominent black men are coming to other black men of status, saying, you want to go somewhere and be respected, where they love us black men, where black men of means are now just like
the military.
Right, just like, don't even get me started on the military. Oh my goodness.
But no, go ahead. I know about the invisible war in the military, where women are more likely to be essayed and while they're in combat, rather
and then be punished. The military women are being
entitled to invisible war. I know all about it. But go right ahead.
But all I'm saying is one of the things, the consumables, is having a passport and flying to parts of the world to engage in what has been going on for decades since the founding of Western imperialism, sex tourism, preying on vulnerable people that the world has forgotten.
It's been before
we have
imperialism.
And just if you need to check this, simply go and look up SA in Dubai, SA trafficking in Dubai, and then look up black celebrities. Put in Will Smith Dubai, Kevin Hart Dubai, Tyrese Dubai, and all that. In fact, just before R. Kelly was taken into custody, guess where he was attempting to flee to? Look it up. He was inquiring if he could go. Yeah.
Time,
Look it up. Look it up. Because some people, I'm gonna make some people squirm because a lot of us go around like, I don't play with that. I don't play with the PDF files. I don't mess around like that. I hear a lot of rhetoric, but it doesn't resonate with the action. So if you're asking me about products they consume, a lot of music, a lot of arts that people consume that are products of or advocate for the dehumanization, objectification, it is part of the economy, like I said. So in all of that, I need to see more actions. It's not enough just to dislike that or be against it or not to do it. In a society where this level of victimization is so prominent, it's like we be telling these white folks, you can't just be non-racist, you have to be anti-racist. You have to act against racism. You can't just say, well, I'm not racist, let me go about my merry way. You can't simply be a non-predator. You have to be an anti-engaged in supporting.
So let me say this, because I've traveled abroad extensively. I try to travel abroad twice a year. My nickname used to be Mr. International. And I recall I went to a developing nation, was out with my best friend, having drinks, had some young women come up to me, and basically said, hey, if you buy me dinner, I'll sleep with you. And I said, no, I'm not into that. So I do know that there's an expectation that people who come from a first world nation will try, when they're traveling abroad, that's what they're looking for. I am not. When I've tried, I'm like, no, I'm not interested in that in any way, shape, or form. But I will say, because I know some brothers who are what some people call passport bros, that when they travel abroad, they aren't looking for someone who's engaged in the sex industry. I know individuals who like to travel abroad because that's just what they like to do with their money, such as myself. And I know that there are some individuals who literally say, listen, I want someone who is not Americanized, someone who is more respectful, so on and so forth.
Someone who's vulnerable.
So right. For example, I've dated non-American Black women, right? But I wasn't looking to engage in some type of sexual predation. So like I said, I think that is a bit of a broad. Now, I'm not familiar with what Will Smith and Kevin Hart were doing because I don't follow them. I don't have a concern or interest in what they do with their lives. I don't even, consume their entertainment. But what I will say is that I know
watch Will Smith movies.
I think the last Will Smith movie I watched was Concussion.
So, I ain't even seen that. So okay, yeah, okay. So closet fan. I ain't gonna.
I ain't a closet fan. It's just reality. Like I don't. The only entertainment I watch right now is boxing and a Ohio State football game. Other than that, I'm working on my dissertation. This is just what it's been for the past year. So.
You watch Concussion and you still support football?
Yeah, I played
shame
football.
On you.
No, there's no shame. I played football.
Shame on you.
There's no shame. I played football.
Shame on you.
There's no shame.
Well, let's get back to the topic. We're not here to dissect your contradictions.
No, it's not a contradiction. It's not a contradiction. I boxed as well. I know the risk that comes with boxing, but I did it. Right? So no, it's not a contradiction. So, Brother Deaf, what's the word?
I just got on real quick just to correct him on the passport bros. I'm a dual citizen, so I travel to Latin America and America often. It's just the quality of women's different. That's all. Just different cultures.
Yeah. Like you go shopping, you go buy a Ford versus a BMW.
No.
Yeah, quality of women. Yeah, that makes
no. What I mean by is
let him articulate his position.
Shitty as hell. Yeah.
What I
Because
mean
you've
by
met
is,
every woman in America,
Wait,
and
wait,
you've
wait,
met
wait,
every woman
wait,
abroad,
wait.
and you
No,
know
no,
the
no, no.
quality.
Hey, no, we're not one mic. Let the brother
He
speak.
didn't say culture. He said quality.
Let the brother
well,
speak.
it's culture.
Objectification. No, you said quality. Stick.
Oh
Don't
yeah,
steal my
but
word.
I mean, what
Don't
I'm
steal
saying
my
is,
word.
what I'm saying
Stick with
is, in
quality.
Western, what I'm saying is, in Western
Thread
society,
count.
pretty much like you brought up about that Cardi B song "WAP," you encounter a lot of women that think that's normal or normal behavior, and it's also black men too. When you go overseas, you
They're
find
pure
a
and
lot of
wholesome because there's no salacious music in Latin
no,
America. There's
no,
no sexually
Hey,
explicit music in the
hey,
Caribbean,
no.
right?
look.
What I was about
I'm
to
not
say
going to tell
is,
you again. I just muted you. Let the brother speak. You can provide a retort, but don't cut him off. The only person that can cut somebody off when Lumumba speaks is Lumumba, because it's my channel. But I don't allow people to cut someone. He's going to make his statement, then you can provide a retort. Okay? We're not going to do that. Go ahead.
pretty much, it's much easier to find a traditional woman. You know, there's not pushback, there's not masculine energy or anything like that. If I want to, let's say I encountered a woman. Before I can even go on a date with her, I got to meet her parents. And her father has to give me approval before I can even go on a single date. Like this one woman I met, who I plan on marrying soon. When I asked her out, I had to meet her father first. Then I had to meet the mother. Then I had to meet her brothers. The very first date I went on was with the entire family. Once the entire family gave me approval, then I could go on a date with her. It's much easier to encounter traditional values overseas than you find in America, sadly. And I don't just blame black women for that. I blame American society and just in general. It's much easier to engage with a woman and have a simple conversation. There's no games. There's no texting games. Nothing like that. You
So
know.
let me ask you this. You stated that you have dual citizenship. What two
Yes.
countries are you a citizen in?
So America. Well, we consider dual by being American citizen and Panamanian citizen.
Panamanian?
Panamanian.
Okay, I've been to Panama.
Yeah, it's much easier to find a traditional woman. Now, are all women like that? No. Yeah, there's some areas where it's known for that type of stuff. But if you're somebody who's looking for someone more traditional, it's much easier to find that overseas than in America. Not saying it doesn't exist in America. It's just much easier. That's all.
Okay.
You know.
So, Brother Kenyatta, you can unmute yourself and allow you to provide a retort. And Sister Erica Mingo, you say that you would love to speak. Would love for you to tap in, be part of the conversation. So I'm gonna put the link right below your message in the chat and get you to tap in as well. So, Brother Kenyatta, you could provide your retort to Brother Depp.
He's still muted, Bakari.
Yeah, there we go.
I think the brother did. I want to say thank you, Def Nos, because you pretty much hit it out of the park in providing an example of the problematic attitudes and outlooks that I'm talking about. How you have a brother from the U.S. talking about tradition. Whose tradition? What traditional culture are you talking about? Because Panama was a colony. Panama, if you look at the history of the Panama Canal, look at the history of the Panama invasion, the history of Panama is one of colonialism and hyper-exploitation from the U.S. So I love when black men, especially, talk about traditional culture as if they're referring to African or any noble or worthy tradition when they're talking about nothing more than the absurd and the obscene Judeo-Christian, conservative, reactionary culture that we were indoctrinated into, the very culture we should be organizing to resist and organizing to fight against is the very culture that we're trying to perpetuate and recreate for ourselves. I have no issue with you having a relationship with a woman that you deem
suitable for you,
traditional, and you wanting to interact with the parents and go through all that stuff. I'm not even going to call it weird. I'm just going to think it, but I won't say it. That's fine if that's what you want. But what I don't understand with brothers like this, I can go into that a little later, but I don't understand why that has to be married to a condemnation of everybody else. Why that has to be, I don't mind you because, I mean, my wife is watching. I'm about to get in trouble, but you know, I dated a Panamanian sister, right? And yeah, I understand, but this Panamanian sister was a revolutionary Panamanian. When I was in college, she was fighting to get the U.S. out, to regain control of the Panama Canal, to build up our economy. You know, Panama is a Christian conservative country. Abortion is illegal in Panama. And it's really sad that a lot of these black men that seek independence for themselves seek independence, and they define independence of being able to lord over black women the same way white men lord over white women, or as the historian Howard Zinn calls, the intimate oppression. So I want a woman that's subservient, and I want her father to give me permission to give her to me.
That's not what he said. That's not what he said.
That's what it is. But okay.
You're painting with a very broad brush.
Okay.
No, let me ask
no.
You can't overtalk me. The question
let me just,
Sister Mingo asks is your traditional woman black?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the question. That was a question that was posed in the chat.
But I wanted to touch on something when he said culture and tradition. I'm not talking about the government, because if you looked at black families in America, despite segregation, you still had a mother and a father in the household. So no matter what was going on outside of that, black people were together. You had traditional values. So I'm not talking about the government. What's happened is, because you have fragmented families, this is where SA does happen. Because when you don't have a father in the household to vet somebody coming up in your house, typically you're more prone to having SA. They don't know me from Adam. Her parents didn't know me from Adam. So they're going to be like, who's this Greenbelt coming up in here talking to our daughter? We need to know who he is, what he's about, before we have approval.
And they approved you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same thing. If I
allow me to say this, do you think, because I like a lot of traditional brothers like to talk about the Jim Crow era where we had two-parent households. Did our ancestors, did our great-granddaddies, our great-uncles, the ancestors whom y'all trying to mimic today with the strong black families, did they have to go abroad? And you're saying that the black woman was corrupted, but the black men somehow escaped this corruption? So if you believe if you believe that black women in America are a different quality, ain't you a different quality too? Because we were subjected to the same indoctrination. So are you not, instead of going somewhere to find something traditional and wholesome? Smells like to me, you spreading the infection. You spreading the zombieism. You going to bite. So don't take your mess to Panama, because I know that if there was some country somewhere, I got two sons. And if there was some foreign country where there was a disintegration, which that's all bullshit, but let's just run with your scenario. There was a disintegration of the family, and the quality of the men are jacked up, and because of what they were subjected to. And then those women from that country get a little money and status and come over here and marry one of my sons, as opposed to understanding and challenging and confronting this escapist shit, that you can't outrun it. And a lot of these quote unquote brothers who go find a different quality of woman somewhere else, we see how that has played out. And it's no different than what the white man's been doing at the same time. I don't think that's appropriate. Now, if you go abroad because you like to travel and you happen to find someone that you have a good relationship with, that's great. But what you have and your fortunate circumstances don't solve, speak to, and don't even reflect what's happening under global white hegemony and black oppression in the United States. So enjoy your coupling, enjoy your relationship, build your family, but stop with the condemnation of black women in particular and your surface level reactionary analysis about the plight of the black community and the black family in general. You can enjoy yourself without this reactionary position that you're taking.
I think you're separating race.
Sister Hanifa, appreciate you. Thank you. If you can tap in and be part of the conversation yourself. Brother Daft Knowles, you provide your retort.
I think you're separating black people from the culture of America as a whole. I think American culture in general is corrupt and it's failing. You can see that in the dating culture right now.
I think most people would agree with that.
You know, you have a lot of men who work 9 to 5s who are making 40 or 50,000 a year, but unfortunately, because of society has portrayed, I like to call the social media society, you have a lot of people who have warped perceptions of what is success. For me, success is having a family. It's not going to school or going to medical school or going to law school or anything like that. It's about having a family that's capable of working together despite the outside influences of society. That's what Black people did during Reconstruction. It's what they did before the Civil Rights Movement. Unfortunately, because you had European and Eurocentric liberal and conservative ideology infesting Black culture in America and throughout the West, it has forced some people like me to try to find a traditional woman either in America or overseas. Now, granted, my father is Panamanian,
Let me ask you this question real quick. When you say traditional, can you define that for the audience?
Tradition is where there's core family values and structures and belief systems that both people can come together on. Like case in point, one of the things I found interesting about Cardi B, and we all saw that music video she did, WAP and all that.
I actually have never watched the video.
Oh, it's pretty bad. It's pretty
you
bad.
You either, I've heard the song, but I've never watched the video.
Yeah, it was good until the Kardashian popped up in the video. It was going well, and then I saw
wait. There was a
totally
Kardashian
ruined it
in the video.
Or what's the lesser Kardashian?
I don't know.
The bargain basement Kardashian. I think a Jenner.
Chloe? Oh, Jenner. Okay.
You know him too. You're so traditional. You shouldn't be able to have this conversation, Mr. Noss.
But
what do you mean? Oh, you're like
what
better
I was getting
than
at. What I was getting at is when she was live streaming. What I was getting at is when she was live streaming, her daughter was in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And when her daughter walked in the room, she was smart enough to know, let me turn that stuff off.
Okay.
Because she knows.
So, and who are you talking about?
Cardi B. Okay. So the very person who made Poison music knew how terrible her music was to prevent her daughter from hearing it. Unfortunately, you have a lot of Americans, not just Black women, you have a lot of Americans who think that WAP is normal. They think that hookup culture is normal, not knowing that the differences between men and women when it comes to sex, pair bonding. When a woman has more than one sexual partner, that marriage tend not to last. I don't know this.
I'm going to ask you very quickly if you could provide some data to substantiate that claim.
I don't have it because I'm in my office.
I don't think you can, but let me ask you this question. You talk about values. What values are you speaking of? So I would say for me to be with a woman, she has to be of African descent and be Black-minded. I wouldn't care what country she was from, as long as she's Black-minded. So what values are you speaking to?
Pretty much family and cultural value. Family values in the context, we look out for one another despite outside influences. That's one. Two, we both have a shared ideology in terms of what we're going to instill in our children. I don't believe in abortion. I don't believe in abortion because I understand the history of Margaret Sanger. I know the context behind it and why it was really pushed in the Black community. I need to make sure that my woman.
So you don't. Okay, go right ahead. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no. You're good. You're good. It's like core values like that. I need to make sure that my wife is not going to tell my daughter, hey, go have your hot girl summer because we all have to have it. I need her to know you're going to have to steal some moral values so that she can better navigate the world and not make mistakes and not choose the wrong person.
Your son as well, I would presume, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
I will trust me.
Can I ask a few questions?
Sure.
If I can interject,
I'm
going to have to hop off so you all can continue the conversation. I just want to say thanks for the conversation. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. I don't want to interrupt the fact that you two are going kind of coming to an agreement or disagreement about this topic. So I'm just gonna dismiss myself, and I'll still be tuned in online, but I have to.
No doubt. Okay, appreciate you, brother Bawana. I see you tapped in. I need you to tag in, brother. Sister Erica Mingo, you stay. And let me read her quote very quickly. She says, "I have a PhD in the family. I defended my dissertation, then made dinner and cupcakes. I know hundreds of women personally that hold down a household and have their own lives. Who do you be around, brother?" Appreciate that. Want you to tap in as well. So I'm gonna put the link in the chat once again. But Quillan, need you to tap in as well. We're gonna have a great Pan-African conversation, but we're now moving towards relationships in the global African community. So
can I ask a series of questions?
Please. All right, so go right ahead.
Number one, Brother Noss, Mr. Noss, what is the dominant religion of Panama?
Catholic.
What is the dominant economy of Panama?
What do you mean the dominant economy?
What economic system do they have in Panama?
SWIFT banking system.
So you don't know. Okay, it's
No.
capitalist, right?
Well, that's
It's capitalist.
SWIFT.
Okay, capitalist. What language do they speak in Panama?
Castilian. It's a form of Spanish.
Spanish. Are any of those? So you have a country in the Western Hemisphere, right? And allow me to ask, how did the Africans in Panama come to find themselves in Panama?
Repeat.
How did the African people of African descent who reside in Panama come to find themselves in Panama?
During the second captivity, slave trade.
Okay, so you have a country in the Western Hemisphere that speaks a European language. Spanish is Spain's Europe. Have a European Western religion, Catholicism, that have a Western economic system. And the black people who got there through a system of chattel slavery and other shit like the Panama Canal, where they dumped a bunch of black laborers, didn't pay them. So just modern day slavery, and a country that is under racist, imperialist, colonial rule. And you
Like
go
America.
to Panama. Yes, exactly. But you find yourself in Panama talking about it's a whole different country with a whole different type of people. No, brother.
Yeah, it is.
It is not.
Despite the
It
outside
is not.
influences,
And I promise you,
people have maintained it.
there are brothers in Panama that sit in Panama right now and fantasize about the American woman and all this fantasies about American women.
Actually,
and there are men in Africa. There are men
I can
throughout the
attest to that.
world. I can attest to it too. I know mad Panamanians. I lived in New York for over a decade. And the Panamanian culture and the Panamanian food, I'm well acquainted with our Panamanian, Dominican, our Afro-Latino communities through my years of activism. And it is a rather immature and a rather inaccurate and incomplete outlook. You sit here and talk about WAP. You can't tell me you never been to a salsa or Panamanian dance or Panamanian dance hall.
I've been to Carnival.
Music. Oh, yes. Well, I haven't been to Carnival. You've been to Carnival in Panama, right?
Mm-hmm. And Brazil,
and it's
actually.
and it's a wholesome, godly affair with no
Well,
no, exactly. So all I'm saying is I love Pan-African. I am a Pan-African.
Behaviors any and everywhere.
Exactly.
And that's what I was getting at. It's everywhere. But I'm saying
right, exactly. So what is the different quality? Because I guarantee you, if this Panamanian connection doesn't work, and nothing I love more than see Africans from the global diaspora connecting or Africans from the continent connecting, I love nothing more to see international cross-border connections of African people. So I would applaud you on that. But I promise you, if this doesn't work out, if you need some chaste, isolated, Judeo-Christian value, traditional Western nuclear family sister, and you want to sit down and ask the father's permission, I can find you a sister like that right here on the south side of Chicago. You know, I come from the projects. My wife came from a 2-family stable household. Listen, we are all under oppression and got our different forms of oppression. But this fantasy about finding something abroad, just these blinders you have on and these misconceptions about the nobility of the Panamanian brothers and sisters, it's going to harm you. I'm not saying don't kick it with Panamanian people. Just be realistic about who and what you're dealing with.
What I always tell people is that there tends to be a sense that foreigners or foreign women are more pleasant. Right? This tends,
I would be pleasant too.
Hey, I got this. There tends to be this sense, right? But I always tell people what you may find on the surface is that there may be more individuals that you come in contact with in particular countries or different ethnic groups or nationalities who take issue with the mainstream's over-sexualization, right? Yep. But what I would argue is people are people. Any and everywhere, right? So like when I talk about someone who's black-minded, to me, that would be someone who wants to have a family. That's someone who wants to have a committed life together and then raise their children with shared values and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think we could find people who maybe we won't even intellectuals, individuals who weren't nationalists or Pan-Africans in terms of their political ideology, but they were black-minded because the way they raised their families and what they did in the community was beneficial to the community, right?
I agree with you. Yeah.
But I use that example. I think my parents are black-minded and they don't even know it. with many of the things that they did growing up. They would have us learn Black history, African history, and they just thought, hey, we just want you to be proud of who you are, not knowing that this had a very strong effect on who I became as an adult.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's something to be cognizant of. Like I dated women from other countries, and so they does tend to it comes off as they're more pleasant, right? But also, as I know, a person gonna be a motherfucker, gonna be a motherfucker, a woman gonna be a woman. If she's
can I throw something else in there too? Can I throw a little something else in there too?
Hold on. She's gonna be problematic, irrespective of what country she comes from. So that's what I'm saying. So if you're saying American women are
all right, so
hey, you can't cut me off of my show. You know this. That what I'm saying is, if you believe that American women are inherently or more problematic,
but statistically,
right. What I'm saying is, you can find problematic women any and everywhere. That's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, dude.
Hey,
there's certain, like I was saying earlier, there's certain
hold
places.
Hold on. So Brother Nas says that women abroad are a different quality than the women in the United States.
No,
you did. That's exactly what brother.
No, I said statistically, you're more.
You didn't say nothing about statistics.
I said
you said women abroad are a different quality than the women of the United States. That's a word for word quote. Yes. And so you're saying that women abroad are of a different quality, and because you have a woman abroad and you saw the woman abroad, that quality is obviously a superior quality. Now, Lumumba is saying, well, no, all women are garbage because they're problematic everywhere. So they're not a better quality. They're bad everywhere. Now, I'm not with neither. I just want the record to state.
No. I just muted you. We're not going to play that game on my channel. You know better than that. You know how I get down. I said you can find problematic women any and everywhere. I did not say all women were garbage. I got a damn daughter. I would never speak in that language, that type of language. So
that's what I'm saying.
So no, we're gonna get this right. You can't come on my channel engaging in that type of sleight of hand. I don't play those games. I said you can find a problematic woman any and everywhere. I never said women
okay, yeah. Let me. Okay. Y'all,
I mean, you can find.
Y'all on here being sensitive, so I'm not being sensitive.
If you're gonna quote me, you gotta quote me correctly.
Okay, I'm trying to correct what I did wrong. Will you allow me to? Will you allow me to?
All the crazy ladies I've dated were Afro-Caribbean. Just saying, respectfully, crazy. So
no, see, that's what I'm saying. It depends on where you go. Like, case in point, when you go, like, I think what he was saying earlier about, like, there are a lot of guys who go over there looking, you know, I'm not gonna go into detail on it. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's certain bars and clubs you can go to like that. But if you're looking for someone more traditional, you're not looking in that area. If your intentions are pure, you know. There's certain areas that like how I met my future wife was in the hospital. She's a nurse. She's a nurse. You know, very traditional. She's, you know, she's just traditional. I'm not going to go on details on that, but based on my experiences in America.
Let me ask you this question. Would you argue that the queen that you're with, she is more demure than what you would argue some American women are? Is that the argument that you're making?
Like pushy, or you mean like
demure, meaning she engages in what's considered
feminine?
Yes.
She's more feminine.
Does she act like? What he's asking is, does she act like a Victorian era white woman?
I wouldn't go as far as say that, no, but she's very nurturing.
Where do you think all that meet the father and all that came from? Where do you think that came from? Africa?
So let me ask you the question. So you think in the present society
in Africa sometimes
so are you making the argument that it would be problematic for my daughter to want whatever guy she's seeing for me to vet her? You said that would be problematic.
No, I didn't say that.
It's just a yes or no. Yes or no. Is that problematic?
I said no. I didn't say that. You won't let me. You won't let me misquote you. So don't misquote me.
I didn't misquote you. It's just a yes or no question.
Have you ever heard of situations? Have you ever heard of situations?
Let me say this. I think it's very important. When I came of age, I started realizing that if I'm dealing with a woman, I would want my sister, my mom, and some of my older female siblings to vet this person. So I think it's important, even my father, I think it's important as I got older to have my parents and other family members vet someone that I'm seeing, because they may see things that I don't see. So I think it's good to have family engaged in that.
That's not what he said.
No, it pretty much is.
Oh,
You don't
okay,
want
I'm
somebody
glad,
just
'cause I
meeting your
thought-
daughter.
I thought-
Hey, have fun, go. No, I want to
Yeah,
know
I
who's my
mean,
daughter talking to. Who's my
everybody do
daughter
that.
talking to?
But who makes the?
And
you
I got to
said you
coach my
had-
son. Hey, be careful who you go with.
You said you had to get their approval, right? You got a son?
Yeah. No, I'm saying if
With-
I had a son.
Oh, because I was about to say, I know you got to be as virginal and as pure as the woman you're seeking, right?
I prefer a woman that doesn't have.
You
a body
are
count.
as virginal and as pure as the woman you are seeking. Am I right?
Oh,
Ain't
hell
no way you would want standards for a woman that you don't live up to yourself.
Well,
In
once
fact,
again,
the standards
goes
for
down-
you as a man should be higher than that of the woman, right?
It goes back to pair bonding. Women are designed differently mentally.
Can you
in
answer
terms
my
of their
question,
emotions.
brother? I don't need your
I'm
lesson.
not.
'Cause
I told you that.
I've been married 20 years. I'm doomed. It's over. I'm gonna die in this. I'm stuck. So I'll never get my Panamanian pure princess like you got. But I'm just curious. I'm just curious. You don't live up to the standards of purity and being chaste, sexually chaste and pure and proper that you are seeking from the woman you want to be with?
Because women
Mr.
have
Nose?
an attachment through sex, which is pair bonding. When a woman has more than one sexual partner, it is
This
very
gets better
difficult
and
for them
better.
to pair bond.
Man, I wish you ever gonna be in Chicago. I'd love to take you out for a soy milk latte. and pick your brains some more. This is mad.
That if a woman has more than just one sexual partner, there would be
there's a statistical count. I don't have it on me, but it shows like the more sexual partners a woman has, the more difficult it is for her to pair bond with that man. Which is why down the road sometimes there's trouble within marriage.
So
yeah, that's why men don't get attached through sex. That's why men don't ever assault, murder, stalk, or go into rages when the woman tries to separate from them or don't bond with them. Because men, when we have sex, we're totally detached. We're stoic and stern. And when a woman puts it on us and whips it on us, our emotions. After the act is done, we walk away unfazed. Correct?
That's where a father would come in to properly educate his son to know what to do.
Look, my sons are in trouble. Nah. Oh yes. So I have to teach my son.
So you said you talking about that's where a father would come in and educate.
In other words, if a son
about what?
Let's say if my son had a bad breakup, I can explain to him what he's feeling, what he's going through, that he's gonna get over it. It just takes time. When you have a son that's going through that and there's no father in his house, of course you're going to have them act out. Let's talk about the South Side of Chicago. I think a lot of those issues, there's no fatherhood. A man is not supposed to act through his emotions.
Okay.
He's supposed to act.
Let's talk about the South Side. Let's talk about the U.S. genocidal military campaigns. Didn't George Bush have a father and he went and killed 1 million people? Donald Trump, a predator and a warmonger, how many wars, international wars, how many nuclear launches, how much depleted uranium and drone missile launches have been launched by generals and military officials who came from stable 2-parent households? The majority of the violence, and in fact, the violence that you find in the Black community is not a result of fatherlessness. It is a result.
No. I agree with you. I agree with you on that. What I'm saying is, I can properly educate my son.
One mic. I think that it is a false equivalency to equate international policy rooted in colonialism, right, and exploitation to a young man misbehaving in the home, or a young man who's I personally. So, for example, I could give a great example. Brother Westside Mike, he's on here. He knows my son. When my son was with me 5-6 days out of the week, the disciplinary issues were minimal, right? His self-control was high. His intellectual curiosity, academic development on par. He was trending in the right direction. His mother took him, moved out to the East Coast, and he has literally disintegrated since, to the point that in the past 2 years, he's been kicked out of school, right? And so she came to me, hey, you need to do X, Y, Z. I said, well, you created one, I'm gonna need full custody. But two, you created this Frankenstein because the lack of structure, the lack of healthy masculine energy in his life, right? And so, I mean, even to the point that when I tried to get full custody of my son, her family even testified on my behalf in court for me to get full custody because they saw the road things were going down. I grew up in a neighborhood where I saw the young men who didn't have their fathers in the home, what habitual disciplinary problems in school, ended up in the penitentiary. So this is something that I saw. Right? I can recall getting in trouble and be like, oh man, when I get home, my dad's going to give me it's hell or high water. And the young man who didn't have a father would be like, ain't no big deal. I ain't got to worry about nothing. So there is a correlation, right, between that lack of structure and discipline. Now, when we go back 2 or 3 generations, we had young men growing up without their fathers in the home, and they weren't going out and becoming miscreants because the culture was different, and the women were able to raise those boys to be responsible, dependable, respectable young men who are a benefit to their community. I know because one of my mentors, right, he was raised by a single mother, and he told me in that back in the 50s and 60s coming up, it didn't matter if you didn't have your daddy, your mama was on your ass, and you respected her. But we've seen a cultural shift in our community. Right? And part of that cultural shift, I think, is at the intersection of integration, is the intersection of the breakdown of our community values, right? It's part of that cultural shift, I think, is rooted in moving towards the provocative. Some of that has to do with the music.
Yes.
Right? So to where some of that has to do with this concept of all of a sudden we're friends with our kids rather than actually raising them. If you're friends with your child, if you're friends, you can't tell a friend what to do. Right? So there's been a cultural shift in our community. I think part of that has been in part of our trying to emulate what we perceive to be white people and how they run their families. For example, I remember when I was 14, we had some friends that live in the suburbs. We all went to the same church, my parents' church. So that weekend, we spent the weekend at my friends in the suburbs, the northern suburbs of Dayton home. So that we went to a movie, I think it was Mortal Kombat 2 came out. So we went to a Kmart to get some candy. And I remember there were some kids in there just cutting a rug. And the white woman, she was embarrassed because her children were acting a fool. So when I got home, I told my dad, like, man, you won't believe what I saw this weekend. I saw children misbehaving in front of their parents in public. And my dad said to me, well, what did you do? I said, I just shook my head. I couldn't believe it. My dad was like, well, you should have laughed, right? So I think some of this is rooted in this is my belief in trying to emulate, right, what we perceive to be what white cultural norms or white ways of raising children. A good example would be, we saw this maybe back in the early 2000s where we saw BET starting to make what some people call shitty versions of MTV reality TV shows.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think people remember Paris Hilton. She had a reality TV show. I can't recall what it was called. And she was carrying around, I guess, like a chihuahua, and the chihuahua had like a little cute outfit and a hat. And then we started seeing Black women on college campuses engaging in the same behavior. So I think some of this could be attributed to what's seeking to emulate what individuals are seeing in the dominant culture.
Okay, so I'm glad initially you said you disagreed with me, but ultimately you circled right back around to what I said. You initially said you can't attribute what's going on in the Black home to imperialism and colonization in the larger system and society. But then as you started to dissect the issue, you found that it's not about the moral failings of Black women or the irresponsibility of Black men, but more of the larger social and I didn't interrupt.
I mean, two things could be right at the same time. Matter of fact, Westside Mike says, I can attest to what Brother Lumumba is saying. Amir was very disciplined, well-behaved, very intelligent. I can attest to that. So like I said, two things could be right at the same time. It's not like we don't have agency in the matrix of domination. It's not like we don't have the ability to think and act for ourselves.
Yes, but if we're going to talk about, because I don't want to talk about your personal situation, because I have my own thoughts about that, being raised, not even by a single mother, but I was raised by a single grandmother because my father's frequent,
Yeah, we talked about that.
The government took my father out of the house, literally through incarceration. And my mother struggles with crack addiction. Mm-hmm. And the few times I was with my father, you know, as a problem child, you know, when you're, but again, that's unique to you. You put that's personal to you. I prefer to speak about a more systemic analysis. The Black family is not in tatters. The Black family hasn't been destroyed. The Black family is under systematic oppression, targeted agendas to subvert our communities and subvert us collectively in order to prevent disruption of the status quo. And you have to go back to that, because otherwise you will be dealing with symptoms, and we can chase symptoms. And when we look at the surface and we only deal with the symptoms, you'll have Black men saying Black woman kicked the Black man out of the house. You have Black men saying Black men are the white people of white. And if we look at the surface and we don't look at the power structures, at the priorities and the targeted subversion and the targeted disallocation or divestment of resources from the Black community, which when you finding that white people, the white folks, that this is not a racial phenomenon ultimately, that other populations, other demographics that suffer the same targeted repression and subversion and backwards policies, oppressive policies, that they suffer the same outcomes: incarceration, drug addiction, and single parent households, and all the other same problems. A capitalist alienation. Marx wrote about this a century ago, and there wasn't no Black people around even going through this shit at that time. Marx wrote about it and happening in Europe under capitalism, imperialism,
and once again, as I
and white
said,
hegemony.
to be right at the same time. As I said before, I used to work for the Montgomery County Fatherhood Initiative, and we worked with men to where they simply were dealing with parental alienation, right? I personally, situations where the mom would tell the boys, you don't have a daddy anymore because I don't want to be with your dad, and the children would start acting out and having behavioral issues, right? So, like I said, two things could be right at the same time. There are situations, we know there are policies and structures at play to what harm Black people and prohibit us from reaching our full potential, right? Restoring ourselves to our traditional greatness. And there are situations in which internally we're doing things to each other for whatever reason they may be. This is a reality.
Whatever the reasons are the most relevant component. How are you going to address it if you say whatever the reasons are? No, let's say what the reasons. What are the two things that are true at the same time? Because you've said that a few times. Yes. Two things can be true at the same time.
You have some individuals who don't want to be married, but they want to have children. You have some individuals who don't want the fathers in the home with the kids. They don't want the fathers providing direction, discipline, structure, and this is a reality. I know this because I work for the Montgomery County Fatherhood Initiative, right? And it had nothing to do with imperialism or white supremacy or capitalism, literally. And we have to be honest enough to admit that.
You said
enough to admit
you said Lumumba. Let me ask you the same question I asked the brother. The individuals who said they didn't want to be fathers, or that they wanted to have children but not have that structure and discipline, you said it has nothing to do with racism and white supremacy?
Correct.
Those individuals you interacted with were never subjected to racism and white supremacy?
Once again, just because someone has been subjected to...
That's a yes or no question.
I'm answering the question by I want it because it's my channel. You know how this goes down.
Oh my goodness.
You know that because someone...
See, the ancestors don't like that behavior, brother.
The
ancestors is trying to tell you something.
White supremacy. That's not the case. If I go out and choose to engage in nefarious behavior because I'm suffering financial problems, that's not a justification for doing so. There are people who devalue being a parent. There are women who devalue fathers. There are men who devalue mothers.
Okay, now we know that.
That's the reality.
That. Now let's go back. You said that has nothing to do with racism and white supremacy. I don't like racism and white supremacy. So the individuals engaged in these behaviors, have they been subjected to the systems and institutions, indoctrination and oppression of racism and white hegemony? Yes or no?
Once again,
I'm not asking you, Mr. Knox. I'm asking Lumumba.
Just because someone has been subjected to it doesn't mean.
So the answer is yes. The answer is yes, right?
There comes a point where you can't have no more excuses.
Yeah,
you gotta be smart enough not to fall.
I'm not making excuses. What I'm trying to do.
Everyone who gets subjected to it doesn't behave that way.
Lumumba, I'll ask you again. You said it has nothing to do with racism, right? And white hegemony. That it is just bad black people who choose independently, free of any other influences or anything outside of themselves or around themselves, that they have independently decided to be bad black people.
I'm making the argument there are black people who independently choose to engage in nefarious behaviors that are detrimental to.
We're not saying nefarious behavior. We're talking specifically about not willing to be fathers and not willing to be mothers.
Correct.
I'm not talking about robbing banks, shoplifting, cheating in a dice game.
And my answer is yes.
So, where did you cultivate your value systems and being a present and engaged father? Where did it come from? You making the end of, and your parents were part of what? A larger community that also instilled and that they introduced you to, correct?
I'm sorry.
Okay, let me.
I was reading the comments. That's why I'm asking.
All right, allow me to say this: people are primates. We are socially oriented primates, and much of our behaviors are structured, directed, and sustained by the ecosystem or the milieu, the cultural, social, political, and economic milieu in which we are cultivated in. And that's why most social scientists, whether they want to do something nefarious or they want to do something good, understand that, as you said several times, you say this often, but then when you want to apply it to the conditions, you abandon it. You said there were social and societal changes, social and societal transformation. So when you can have 80, 90, 70% of two-parent household transform and move to be almost single digit in some regions and teens and low 20% two-parent households, that is nothing that you cannot, no sane, rational researcher or no sane, rational social scientist would say, well, this is just a lot of people changed their mind independently and decided to do this instead of that. So you have to look at the policies, the priorities, the societal inputs, the societal rewards, the societal sanctions and supports. Even Donald Trump, when he was in a campaign speech, says we need more white children. And what did Donald Trump says he wanted to do to have more white children? Just inform white men to have more white? No, he said, I'm going to employ the apparatus of the state to incentivize through material supports, and that married to cultural, social supports and motivations. It would be a campaign. So Black people's behavior, there are individual elements. Oh, you're back. I was just trying to carry it till you came back.
No, I'm still here. I just went off camera.
So I think a lot of times African people fail to transform our situation, because a lot of times we do try to say, well, it's Black people who just choose to do the right thing.
No.
Black people choose.
I have a thorough understanding of what's taking place.
I wish you would articulate that understanding.
I have articulated that on several cases, but what I'm also stating that there are individuals who choose to just be different. I mean, we have to acknowledge that. There are individuals, like I said, I've worked in the family court system. I was part of the County Fatherhood Initiative. So Brother Wisdom speaks, never sleeps, you're here. So I understand that, but there are individuals, irrespective of that, who choose to not be mothers and fathers. We have to acknowledge that.
Okay, I acknowledge. There are people who choose
to
make a choice. And there are people who choose to eat a standard American diet. There are people who choose to be fathers. And just like your choice to be father was an independent of your environment that you came up, the man who chose not to be a father is also. I asked you about your choice, and you were very clear. Well, it's from what my parents instilled in me and the larger community. But then you say, well, the guy who chose the wrong thing is just because he chose independently of everything to do the wrong thing. But I chose to do the right thing because of my environment.
Once again, yes, I did. Well, one, my parents told me and my dad told me, if you are a father and not a father to your child, you'll never be welcome in our home again. Cool. But I also know individuals who came up with the same upbringing as me and chose to do differently. Right? And like I said, I know this because from anecdotal experience, from working with the Montgomery County Fatherhood Initiative in the Montgomery County Juvenile Court. That there were women who said, you know what? I told this man I want to have a family, get married, and then I had the children, or they got married, had the kids, and they said, I don't want to be with you, and I'm taking the kids and moving somewhere else. These things actually happen. And so when people,
I'm not denying that those things happen.
When they act like people are doing this under their own free will and own mind, that's when it becomes a bit disingenuous, and we are holding people accountable.
I'm not denying that those things happen. So you keep telling me that these things happen as if that's my argument. Do you understand that my dispute in this is that I'm talking from a revolutionary perspective. I'm not just interested in saying bad things that happen and recounting, because you send me a lot of links to all these horrendous acts that individuals carry out. But I understand, as I was saying before, Trump wants to increase the white birth rate. Mm-hmm. Are you aware of that in his campaign? I'm gone. Can y'all still hear me?
You still hear you.
Okay. Is Trump saying, well, I want to increase the white birth rate? Is he saying I need to change the mind of individual white men and women to get them to get together and have more babies? Or is he saying I'm going to employ the apparatus of the state, the propaganda apparatus, the economy of the state, the infrastructure of the state?
Is to change people's minds.
And the infrastructure, not just to change people's minds.
Yeah, that's part of it.
He's also employing the infrastructure. He's going to incentivize through housing, labor, economic policies. He's going to use the full power of the state to initiate a baby boom.
Right, and they still can't have babies that they don't know. So I'm gonna let you tap in.
So all I'm saying is, this problem did not start with individuals, and it will be not solved through individuals. So we as revolutionaries can understand there's a lot of tragic stories and a lot of tragic individuals saying and doing a lot of tragic shit. But when we look at something as from a curative standpoint, from a transformative standpoint, we have to have a radical, meaning look at the root, not just the symptoms and the surface. We have to have a radical analysis and revolutionary solutions.
I get what you're saying.
And I agree with that. And some of that radical analysis is rooted in the fact that we have to understand, like I said, when you talk about the apparatus of the state, you talk about the propaganda, part of that's rooted in changing people's minds. You could change, you could bring in structural changes to what society, but there's still people who are going to say, you know what, I don't want to do X, I don't want to do Y. And that's something that's a reality. Brother Death, I'm going to let you tap in, then wisdom never sleeps. I'm going to give that to you. And I think Sister Monika's tapping back in as well. And I think someone who is truly rooted in the community and is really out there, not just engaged in the echo chamber, we would see that there are individuals who unfortunately engage in these type of behaviors on a regular basis for a number of reasons. And some of it is, when we talk about this issue of some individuals not wanting to be fathers, not wanting to be mothers, because they have freedom not to be. Right? Because there isn't a community apparatus that and the community isn't able to shame the person into doing.
Lumumba, I have a quick question for you. I have a real quick question. You
Please.
Understand the population of Europe is collapsing and white women aren't having children, right?
I am aware of that.
Is that because white women just made an individual? When you read about the population and the demographic issues in Europe, have you read any type of social scientist or white nationalist or white person that wants to challenge this state? Oh, it's just white women made a decision not to have no more babies.
See, that's what I was saying.
No, I'm asking Lumumba. Just give me a moment.
I'm going to answer the question. Once again, as I stated, two things could be true at the same time.
I didn't ask you that. I didn't ask you that too. I didn't ask you if two. I agree. A dozen things could be true at the same time. But when you look at white people's analysis, they talk about, well, anyway, okay, I'll accept that as your answer.
Brother Dan,
pretty much what I was going to say is you're right. If you know John B. Calhoun, have you heard of that experiment? John B. Calhoun's experiment, the mouse experiment. Okay.
Yes,
So yeah,
but that experiment was seen to be flawed. A lot of people who peer reviewed that saw that there was a lot of flaws in that, and not only was the experiment itself flawed, the analysis and conclusions reached as a result were also flawed. But go on.
well, it seems to mirror society right now. It touches on exactly what you were touching on about birth rates. Look at the way dating is right now. Look at the way families are created now. It fits that experiment. So yeah, but what I'm getting at in terms of fathers,
I don't see any cannibalization, widespread cannibalization, and societal disintegration.
Well, I see a lot of men who are now called incels because they don't have a woman. I see a lot of men who are becoming more aggressive, SA, because they don't have a woman.
That's what causes SA. So that's all the women's fault.
No.
Wow. Okay.
I'm saying how society is changing, and I agree with you how outside societal.
What is changing society? What is changing society?
The way structure, government is set up, the way policies have been put in place. I don't want to say by race. Project.
Yeah, you don't want to confront the white man. I don't want to say race. I'll sit here and blame black women for everything.
I would
I'm
say
willing to go head up with the black woman. I'll blame black kids for everything, but I ain't gonna say race because then that'll make you go toe to toe with the man with the aircraft carriers and the nuclear bomb.
Human beings.
That's another problem.
Are not supposed to live in confined spaces called projects. This is where
I grew up in the
from.
projects. My baby brother grew up in the projects, and my brother is an accomplished, has a degree. I have a master's. My brother has a master's. My sister is a successful entrepreneur.
And
we were all raised in the projects.
And you are an outlier.
So do you want to hear about my homies and all the other success stories from the projects? It wasn't because the problem with the projects is when they put us in projects, we adapted and we created communal society within the projects. And then they had to bring in drugs, they had to bring in gangs, they had to put in things. It wasn't just, but when they put us places and just leave us alone, we turned ghettos into communities. And that's why they never left us the fuck alone. That's the thing with that. It's a relentless attack. You just act like, they put us in a project and we turned to animals. You don't look at the CIA, you don't look at the FBI and the COINTELPRO, how they subverted leaders, how they corrupted. It wasn't just they put us in the projects and left us alone. So the problem is not the projects is the white man. The problem is the white people.
What I'm saying is you get to a point where you have to be.
Hold on for 1 second. Brother Kenyatta, can you let Depp finish his point without interrupting? And then after Bakari wants to allow you to respond, we'll do that. So Brother Depp, if you go forward on your point, please.
What I'm getting at is, despite outside influences from white people, when you have a structural family, that outside influences do not affect that family. Adolf Hitler knew that. That's why when they did propaganda, they noticed that people who came from structural families did not buy into his BS. Yes.
Is this an appropriate moment to respond to that absurdity that you just stated?
Let him finish his point. Depp, if you can just wrap up your point so he can respond.
I'll wrap it up real quick and I'll jump on to Black communities during the Reconstruction period. You had more politicians then than you do now. You had more Black businesses then than you do now. So despite racism, despite post-slavery, you had Black people who had strong communities who were able to work together for a betterment. You don't have it anymore. So when you say that that it's not important to have fathers in the household or fathers don't play a factor in what Black people go through, it's a lie. When you have a structural family, those outside influences, the effects are not as strong. That's why when there's a mother and a father in a household, the children tend to prosper economically better. When you have a father in a household, Black boys tend not to go to jail as often if it was from a single family. How can you not see that? And I'll just end it with that.
I have not once. I am a Black father who's in the home with my my oldest son is in college.
You're using your outlier. I'm saying
no. Allow me to finish. I not only advocate for Black fathers in the home, I am a Black father in the home. I've been with my wife 23 years. And I am a Black father in the home. So you don't need to lecture me on the benefits of having a Black father in the home. And I say that as a Black man who grew up without a Black father in the home. So yes, that's on the table. That's fine. I'm not trying to dissect or discuss the benefits or of the Black father being in the home or being absent. What I'm trying to get to is the core so that we can begin to orient and organize ourselves to correct these issues. Y'all want to skim the surface and highlight all the negative shit and then have these fantasies about Jim Crow era America and Reconstruction era America and misinterpret how we came to the good stuff y'all define, while you act like that good stuff happened in a bubble without the rampant assault that we were under, the daily terroristic threats. Because yes, I was just spending time with my 90-year-old aunt who was born and come to adulthood under Jim Crow. And it really frustrates me when back in the day, where we have this fantasy about what happened back in the day that is not fully informed. So we don't want to return to the past. We need a revolutionary future. We need to advance revolutionarily. And this whole surface analysis, where we look at symptoms that occur on the surface and we target vulnerable people and identify them as the source of the problem, instead of looking at the core, looking at the root, which is what radicalism is. It means to look at the root of an issue and attack the root of an issue instead of the surface. Until we do that, we're going to be running on this treadmill. And then another 50 years from now, we're going to have Black people in an even worse condition, fantasizing about the 2020s. Oh, we had this in the 2020s. So instead of fantasizing and misinterpreting about what we had in the past, let's build and have an intelligent analysis, a radical analysis about how we came to this so that we can correct it in a revolutionary Pan-African point of view.
Brother Kenyatta, we're going to come back to you so you can expand on that point. At the moment, we're going to have Brother Wisdom share his thoughts.
Now, go ahead. I'm going to listen a little bit longer because this is exhausting. But go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, so my question that I just wanted to chime in. So I was listening and then I hopped back on. So one of the things that I wanted to say about what it sounds like I'm hearing, and Brother Kenyatta, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking about more systemic issues when you say that you don't want us to gloss over the things that are happening within the community. Don't pinpoint individual African Americans, Black men, the Black family, or Bakari specifically focusing on the things that happen within his family to paint this picture that Black people are the cause of their issues. I think with a lot of our ideology, we know that we can't handle the things that are happening to us on an individual level. What I'm hearing you operate from is a more macro level. And then I'm also hearing what Bakari is saying as a more micro level. So we know that we have different levels where transformation and change need to occur. So am I wrong in maybe assessing or analyzing the fact that the way that you're viewing this is probably from a more macro systematic level, where we're looking at things that we need to do as a cultural whole? And then what Bakari was speaking to is more of a micro level, meaning what does this macro level look like when we dissect it down into our family system, our family structure, our day-to-day? Would that
and one of the things that I focus on in the work that I do is agency. Right, we all know we're living under systems of oppression. If it's secondary education, post-secondary education, we could talk about the police state, right? I focus on agency, right? And we know, Monica, you and I have worked together. We've worked on some of the macro level systemic issues in the community, how to overcome these issues, get these barriers removed, so on and so forth. But I focus the work that I'm doing on agency. And that's my focus, right? When we talk about the revolutionaries of the past, there was an understanding of the macro level issues, but it was always focused on an agency and a matrix of domination. And what I'm also stating is, I don't believe in blaming the white boogeyman for every negative behavior that Black people engage in. I'm not going to always say if I did something wrong, or my son chose to do something wrong, it's because he's living under and been influenced by white hegemony. I'm not going to play that game, because that doesn't help my son become a better young man, be responsible, move forward, be self-determining, etc., etc. That doesn't work well for anyone, right? Now, there may be some situations where he's influenced and he engages in particular behaviors, but to, like I said, paint a broad brush and state that whenever a Black person is engaging in behavior that we would argue is racially disempowering, self-defeating, or self-destructive, I would argue is not only intellectually disingenuous, it's also intellectually lazy. Now, I heard a point where someone talked about the projects and how they didn't leave us alone. I agree with that. Asana Shakur talked about this. She waxed poetically and eloquently in her memoir about after the Black Power struggle ended, they had to deal with drug dealers, not COINTELPRO and the Alphabet Boys, and that these criminals that were in the Black community, who unfortunately happened to be Black people, were being aided, abetted, and provided cover by law enforcement to destabilize the Black community when they were coming out of what? The Black Power and Civil Rights movement. But at the same time, we also have to understand that Black people still have the agency not to engage in those behaviors and activities. That's the reality. Because the majority of Black people, when crack cocaine hit, did not engage in the selling and use, distribution of drugs. So what's oftentimes
Lumumba
conversation is what? The focus on agency. The focus on being able to repel and overcome the insidious structural, interpersonal, levels of oppression that white supremacy seeks to white hegemony seeks to impose upon us. So that's the focus of my work that I do.
You keep circling back. You say, well, I don't blame the white man for things that Black individuals
That's not what I said.
You said it's wrong, it's disingenuous, all that, to say everything a Black person does wrong is the fault of the white man, right?
I said white hegemony.
Okay,
because if I was going to say the white man, I would say the white man and his wife. But go right ahead.
Okay. But then you use as an example of Black people choosing to do wrong that we can't point at the white man, gangs and drug dealers. Right?
I mean,
that was your example.
A great example. Well, I didn't.
No, I don't want to. I just want to deal with what you previously.
Oh, no. Well, for one, I can do whatever I want. It's my channel.
No, I just said what.
Oh my God. So a great example.
Lumumba.
Right, Stanley Tookie Williams. I have his memoir right behind me. The Crips gang wasn't created because they were fighting white hegemony. He states in his memoir that they created the Crips gang simply because they wanted to fight against other criminals.
Okay. But so what you're saying is, instead of me trying to get some clarification of what you said, well, I'm just going to keep stacking on. So instead of just dissecting your statement about white hegemony and what Black people can blame and what we shouldn't blame on white hegemony, what is ultimately our fault, independent and separate from white hegemony. Can we deal with that for a moment? Or Absolutely. No, because this is your channel and Absolutely. You don't want to. Okay, great. I appreciate you allowing us. Now, when you use the example of the gang, we all know from the research and journalist, Gary Webb, the journalist, exactly. So you said, well, but the example you used immediately after stating, hey, you want the white boogeyman, which I think is obscene. That's absurdist statement that we should not say the white boogeyman, as if Black people's our white enemies are somehow a figment of our imagination or some mythological monster, instead of the people who are literally destroying the life-sustaining capacity of the earth as we speak. So I think dismissing Black people's assertions about what white people continue to do to us, talking about white boogeyman, I think that's whack.
Come on, because you get to a stream of logic. I need you to make your point.
But you just said the gangs. When we have tons of data going back from, like you said, Gary Webb, you got his books, going to Ward Churchill, the author, the man who literally wrote the book on COINTELPRO, said that the gangs were facilitated, supported, funded, armed, and given the biochemical warfare weapons of crack by the state. So at the very example you used to say we can't blame the white man because we did wrong, the gangs would not be as deadly prominent and wouldn't even have survived as long as they did. The gangs wouldn't even be here in the degree that they're here, if not by coverage of the state. So do you give me an example?
You never talk to me on my channel. You know this.
Can you give me an example?
I stated before.
Can you give me an example of a systemic problem that we endure that can't be?
You cannot overtalk me. I've told you this before. I don't know why you keep doing this. You've been on my channel before.
But you overtalk other people. So why don't you like dude?
It's called the Moon Speaks. I can do that.
Yeah, that's real. Okay. All right.
It's called The Moon Speaks. Yeah, just like when I go in someone else's house, no man is bigger than the man of the house. I don't go in someone's house and try to overtalk them, right? So when I go in another man or woman's house, they make the rules, they make the pronouncements. If you don't like it, you can leave. It's that simple.
I asked you.
As I stated before I was rudely interrupted, we are all aware of COINTELPRO. We are aware of Gary Webb's brilliant analysis in I forget the name of the book. I had just had my class read the excerpt from it 2 weeks ago. However, the issue is we have to also be cognizant of the fact that we did not have to engage in these behaviors. And one of the things that we do know tends to take place that brought down the Black Power movement was Black people engaging in criminal activity. They would be caught engaging in criminal activity. And then the state would use them. They would put, you're going to get 15, 20 years. They would hold that over their head as a way to get them to work against the benefits of their own people. Right? So we have to be cognizant that two things can happen at the same time.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
On your channel?
Yes.
Name a persistent systemic problem that infects or afflicts the Black community that cannot be blamed on the white man or white hegemony or whatever you want to call the capitalist system or our oppressors. Name one.
Personal responsibility.
That's not a systemic problem. That's something we should strive for. If you're going to try to feebly answer a question, at least listen to the question and comprehend the question before you incorrectly ask it.
I would make an argument that what we've seen in the past 40 years, well, actually since integration, is a devaluing of education.
So no, do you have an answer or not to that question?
I asked?
What is it? I
said the devaluing of education in the Black community. Education being seen as being rooted in acting white. We know there are a score of the Association of Black Psychologists. They've read numerous position papers on this. And this is not something that we saw, unfortunately, by and large, prior to integration.
So the devaluing of education is an independent, freestanding Black problem that Black people have developed from within our community and inflicted upon ourselves and sustained with ourselves.
The belief that being smart is acting white.
And ask about a belief. I asked about a persistent systemic problem. And you think so you're saying the Black community has devalued education, which is not true.
On a macro
there is no survey, no statistics, no nothing. When you say Black people, the problem is the divestment of education.
Again, there is data to substantiate this from the Association of Black Psychologists. I know because I have the books behind me. There is data to substantiate that. I have the books.
I'm good friends. I'm good friends with the president of the Association of Black Psychologists, Dr. Obari Cartman, and I would ask you to invite him on your show.
With that, I have the literature right behind me.
I appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate the invite that you sent me. And I look forward to our ongoing dialogue. But with that, I'm going to have to wish everyone a good evening.
Before you go, let me chime in on something, because this is when I said exhausting before, because I'm listening and listening and listening. And I don't want to say this to offend you, but it seems like you come in with the same race hustle that a lot of these people out front called Black leaders do. We seem to not want to, no matter what anybody says, you keep going back to the system. We all are in this system, it's their system. And you can't not say if you made it through the system based on your decisions, then someone who's still living in the system is having a decision that they make as well. No one is excusing a system or systematic things that we live through or come up in. I'm from a family of 11 with a 2-parent household. And there are some that married and had kids, some that went to the service. There are some that got on drugs, became alcoholic, and had different baby daddies. Some married and have 9 kids with one father, with one husband. So even from the same, we come up in those 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So even with that spectrum, there are systems in place because they have set up systems all the time. But that means that at some point, The adult have to make decisions on what's presented to them. Now, when you're talking about gangs, our gangs are the only wars that have yet to end. World War I, World War II, any other war that's
brother.
No.
I gotta go.
Well, you can listen
Right,
offline, but I'm not going to allow you to interfere with me because I listened to all.
But
this
I was
stuff.
exiting. You asked me to stay for a moment.
Well, yeah, but what you ready to go?
I wasn't going to be here to interrupt you, but you asked me to remain.
I appreciate it, but what I'm saying to you is, you can't keep saying the race hustle thing all the time.
Okay, yeah, I'm race first. I am. If you call it a hustle, I call it a conscious, systemic, radical analysis. And tonight, as many questions as I posed, I haven't heard. I am up for a reasoned argument and evidence-based arguments, and I am willing to change my position when I am confronted with evidence that shows me that I'm on the wrong path. And unfortunately, I haven't encountered that this evening. So I'm going to have to wish everyone a good night.
Of accountability for the individual decisions. You never did that.
Brother Wisdom, if you could just allow Brother Kenyatta to say his piece before he exits. It sounds like he can listen on his own. He doesn't have to be on the live to hear what you have to say. He said he has to leave. So if he can just allow himself to exit, and then you could just finish with your points.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate the exchange. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the invite, and I hope to carry forward in the future. So I like to say that, and thanks to you specifically, Sister Monica.
Thank you, Brother Kenyatta, for your contribution.
Aiding us in this. All right. Good night.
Good night.
So, like I said, it's sad that we still seem like every one of these type of Pan-African people, the one thing they will not want to talk about is individual or group accountability in the conversation, in the dialogue. Every time we revert to that, it always goes back to the system of what's set up. Then we was talking about, and when they talk, they always talk from the liberal side because they want to attack the right. I can tell when they bring up the president's list, like their president list are not a cause of a lot of issues in our own communities. Moreover, when you say that, when you're talking about Trump says he wants to have more white babies, well, Joe Biden, the one told the black people in their meeting that by 2054, that the white people will be the minority, and you must get used to working with this Spanish. Why didn't he bring that up? It wasn't just Trump. Trump just has a bigger voice at that time. A lot of people are concerned about the annihilation of their own race. Period. That has nothing to do with him creating a new system or a new something to them. Look, I have a problem with us eliminating our people, our messiahs, long before they come in the world. But he didn't bring that up, all the millions of us that never made it to see. And we still remain at 13%. We could have been a greater percentage due to abortions and murder and everything. Just because the FBI, whoever drops guns on the street, that don't mean you have to pick them up and kill your own people.
Thank you.
It don't make sense to keep saying what has been done, where then you yourself as a father and husband for 23 years, but yet you still say these people out here are so bad with the system they can't make it to where you are. That's ludicrous to me. That's what was exhausting listening to. I'm trying to do a revolution without having the people to be accountable, like I was accountable and made a good decision myself. If somebody can make that make sense to me, please help me, because it doesn't right now. That's like me telling all my sons, look, I'm going to save you. I don't want you to do nothing for yourself, even though I'm trying to create a legacy all on my own. I did this, and I'm an example that you can make a decision to get somewhere, but you don't really have to, because you live in a system, even though I lived in that same system too. We all still live in that so-called system you're talking about, but there are people who are making a difference. But we as a collective people, no matter what the individual success is, or as you call the outliers, but we still looked at it as a collective body of people. we're all going to be at the same level no matter what we do individually. We're still looked at as the same class. So if we're going to be fourth class citizens, guess what? The doctors, the lawyers, and any chief that's black going to still be considered fourth class citizens, just with a higher level of degrees or prestige or whatever they have, a little more money. But you're still in the same collective. But if we can never have self or collective accountability, because I would say this to everybody when they was talking about, they went over to Africa saying, here's some money, but you got to promote LGBTQ. And I come back to say, that's our fault in America that we have representation trying to tell somebody else about our brother how to live because we never push back. We vote for those same people that give us the same policies that hurt us. We keep living through something and we won't take self-accountability because why? It hurts. It's painful. We know that, see, racism, the system itself, is to try to own and control as much as resources, land, infrastructure, your waterways, and everything. So you can't revolution anything if you don't want to own anything. I mean, that's the fact. I mean, we just got to stop with this. We all understand that there's a system in place. Just like the 13th Amendment. If I tell my sons, look, you go out here and go to jail or prison, you become a slave. That's in writing. You're not free at that point. You're enslaved. It's in writing in the 13th Amendment. So where's their accountability for trying to stay out of trouble? And they don't care. They keep going back and forth and back and forth. You like being enslaved, but that's not self-accountability because it's a system. The 13th Amendment did it to you. That's what the race hustlers say. Meaning when I say race hustlers, let's use the weak of us to make us look like we're trying to help them, even they don't have to be accountable. It's sad that when you can make yourself better, but yet you say nobody else can make a decision like you made yourself. Thank you.
Brother Depp, thank you for your commentary, Brother Wisdom, for sharing that. Brother Depp, did you want to respond to that?
I agree with him. That's pretty much what I was just getting at. You know, I'm not going to obfuscate what white people have done historically and currently. All I'm getting at is if you have a strong family or community, you can rise above that or you can mitigate it. You know, I have situations where I've had some people price me out of a piece of land that I wanted to buy for obvious reasons, and I had to work around it. You know, luckily I had a support structure and a family that helped me get it. You know, so I agree with him wholeheartedly. Especially when he said it, when they dropped weapons and just let it out there, you don't have to use it. You know, that's all that I was getting at. I think that a lot of the issues that we face in the Black community can be solved if we just come together and try to reclaim a sense of community.
I agree. And thank you for sharing that. And someone, I can't see the comments that were put up in the chat, but I think someone did speak to that. Like she mentioned, I think her name was Miss Reality. There's no point in kind of debating about, oh, there you go. Thank you. Both systemic racism and the need of self-accountability are at play. No point in trying to pick which one is more of the issue. So I think that's a great point, because right now we've come to an impasse where we're arguing whether or not we should be accountable or take responsibility for our actions, or if we should acknowledge the system, when we all know that both need to happen. We all need to understand the way the systems impact us on all levels: education, economics, financial, within our families, all the systems that we encounter within our daily lives. We have to understand that all of those systems are at play. But knowing how the system operates and what its intention is for our people, then on the flip side of that, we have to create our own systems, create our own levels of education, understand what the system is trying to do and how we can circumvent it. So I don't think that we were missing each other. I think we just came to an impasse on where do we go from here. If we took what Brother Kenyatta was saying, and then Depth, Wisdom, and Bakari, what you all were saying, we were acknowledging what the problem was on both sides, at both a macro level and a micro level. I think the question becomes, if we understand the systems at a macro level And then we know that it impacts us at a micro level within our families and communities. What is the way forward for the community, considering both of those two things are at play? I think that was the opportunity that was missed to move the discussion forward at that point. So,
Correct. So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what I was talking about. A lot of times when people only focus on the system, systemic and all that, and no accountability for your own decisions, we're still the only culture of people that do not teach our children anything about our culture or who we're supposed to be or family values on the weekend or after school. We still look for the system of the school setup to do everything. Anybody comes into American system of education, they will go to the schools, but when they go home or they go out, they have after school to teach their own stuff, their own language and everything. Now, with that being said, we don't do that anymore. We say, oh, we should, Black History Month, we need more than 1 month. Okay, you got every day to teach your kids about Black history, to learn yourself in your home. That's accountability as well. We have to stop looking for them to do for us and still say they're making systems that is against us. You can't have both of those the same way. Just like you just said.
Brother Wisdom, I do apologize, but I'm going to play a video that I showed my class the other day to speak to what I'm talking about, right? So I want everyone to watch this. Give me 1 second. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Breaking the window, and then they said they had stolen windows, which I did. I did steal the radar.
What year are you in college, young man?
Excuse me?
What year are you in college?
My freshman year.
You must not go to class too often, because that's much too dumb. You sound much too dumb to be going to class regularly. Why would you risk your college education? You're in college. Where you come from? What city you from?
New York.
New York. You done made your way out of the streets of New York. You get up to college. You're going to risk your college education and your freedom. Stealing. You say you didn't break in. I believe you did that too. But you're going to steal out of this woman's car. Why? Why?
And it was there, man. It was there.
Because it was there.
It was just there. It was
Anything that you see that's there and unattended to, you intend to steal it, huh?
No.
Well, then why did you do this? Why did you steal hers?
I don't know.
Don't know. You ever been convicted of anything?
No.
And you have no idea why you broke the law and decided to steal after you got out the streets of New York and went to college. You have no idea why.
Ah.
This is sad. You have parents?
Yeah.
Mother and a father?
Yes, sir.
Both at home?
One at work and one at home.
This is the saddest case I've seen in a long time. You're in college and you're gonna go break in somebody's car or, by your own admission, steal from a fellow student, committing a felony which could result in your incarceration in prison. And here you're supposed to be there getting an education, and I ask you why, and I don't know. You give me some stupid answer about you don't know. And then once you go to prison, you're going to blame somebody else for your problem. Point your finger at the system. Talk about they got you here, and there's an injustice, and yeah, and feel sorry for yourself, and be calling people crying, want some money. Call your mom and daddy, come get me for bail. Call your girlfriend begging for money. Send me some money for cigarettes. Put some money on my account. They doing me wrong. These men, y'all get me out of here. Why won't nobody come visit me? Why won't nobody write me? Acting pitiful for yourself. That's what's gonna happen. That happens. I see it every day. You're not the first one. Don't you know they got a trap waiting on you? Don't you know that's why they building all these prisons? For fools like you to go to, and now they're privatizing them so they can make money. They're no longer nonprofit. They're making money off these prisons. Corporations are building them and running them so they make a profit off fools like you and pay you 80 cents a day to work and lay the people off on the outside. And you walking into the trap? Pitiful. Did you prosecute him?
I went to both of his court hearings and he didn't show up for one of them, so I'm not sure.
Hopefully they won't convict him. Give him a break, all right? Because he's too stupid. I don't even want to see him in jail. Give him one more chance, all right? He's just making it out the streets of New York. I'm going to give you your money, but don't prosecute him. Don't send him to prison. Give him a chance. $3,000, $450.
Go right ahead, brother. Wisdom never sleeps.
Well, I'm glad you played that video because the gentleman that left, he would have said the system there to do it. The white woman set him up by having a car in front of him and had the stuff laid out. It was all systemic. Miguel, you know, he was in college and stuff like. But Judge O'Brien said the same thing I'm saying. He had made decisions going forward, but he also, whether he was influenced by somebody else or someone dared him to do it, it was still a decision he had to make at that moment.
Right.
And, you know, no matter what you tell people, a lot of people making this, and I said, these are not mistakes. These are decisions, not mistakes, because you have time to think about what you're going to do. We always say everybody makes mistakes. Mistake is something that you didn't even think happened, like, oh, you grabbed the wrong book or something like that, or you meant to turn right and turn left unknowingly. But when you pick up that gun or a knife or you want to break in somewhere, you've made a decision because you have to think about those things. That's not a mistake.
And the thing is, like I said, anyone who is serious about helping the Black community understands the overarching system of oppression that we live under globally, not just here in America. But anyone who's honest knows you don't help a child become a responsible adult by telling them that whenever they make a bad decision, it's because of white people.
Exactly.
And I have 2 children, right? I don't know if anyone else on the channel has children, but I have children. So this is praxis for me. I know I'm not doing my children a favor. I know I would be doing them a disservice. But whenever they make a bad decision, I find a way to say it's some other overarching issue that contributed to you making the wrong decision. I mean, this is just literally insane to me. And I'm going to make this claim, even though some people may not like this, but we find this kind of thinking heavily rooted in feminist theory. How can I say this? Because I've read the literature. I have numerous books behind me on feminist theory. Feminist theory focuses completely on structure and takes away accountability, agency, personal responsibility. This is a reality. Mm-hmm. I know this because I've read the literature. Like when I was making the claims about Black people not valuing education, I could pull the books right behind me and read from the textbook word for word. So this isn't hyperbole. This isn't me engaging in subterfuge. I'm not trying to be disingenuous or play loose with the facts. I have literal scholarship to substantiate what I'm saying. And anytime you're trying to help someone, we talk about our great revolutionaries, right? They focused on what? The overarching system. And they also looked at what we could do to what? Empower ourselves and restore ourselves to this greatness, irrespective of the overarching system. Malcolm did it, Fannie Lou Hamer, Yaa Santawa, Queen Mother Moore, Marcus Garvey, and the list goes on for days. Anna Julia Cooper, Mary Church Terrell, right? All of them understand, hey, this is what's taking place. This is what they're seeking to do to us, but we are not going to fall for the banana in the proverbial tailpipe. Right? I used to box. If you keep getting hit by the same punch over and over again, it doesn't mean that the guy you're fighting is Floyd Mayweather Jr. or Willie Pep or Willie Armstrong or Henry Armstrong or Sam Langford or Joe Louis. It means you just got some trash ass defense. That's what it means. Mm-hmm. 2 things could be right at the same time. Because I remember there was a time I was boxing and I took my son to the boxing gym. I finished sparring. There was a young white boy who got in the ring. He kept getting hit by the same punch over and over. His trainer, in between rounds. It's like, what in the bleep is wrong with you? Why do you keep allowing him to hit you with the same punch over and over? If he keeps hitting you with the overhand right, put your damn left hand up. Like I said, the lack of accountability, the lack of focusing on Kuchishakalia self-determination is mind-boggling to me from people who state they actually want to help the Black community. It's mind-boggling.
My point. I've been on a lot of these things, and that's always what they do. Is that it's the same as the so-called Black leaders out there in media and everything else. They do not want the Black people to be accountable, but they just want to blame white supremacy. The white supremacy.
Or I mean,
but yet you're living a great life.
Yeah, but another example would be we have individuals who are committing crimes against other Black people, breaking into their homes, stealing the car, all type of crazy stuff. They go to prison, and then it's the system took him away from our family. Like, what type of nonsensical gibberish is that? I mean, literally.
Just like all the Walmarts that leaving and all the stores, but yet they out there keep stealing and breaking in. And then the mayor goes, it's Walmart's fault. It's the corporation's fault. Yeah. They need to be here. For what? And
the part is just, like I said, as a parent, I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old. I would never tell. Now, my children they understand the overarching system of white hegemony. They understand anti-Black racism, the whole nine. I mean, sometimes they are more well-versed in the talking points than I am. You know what I mean? Because they've been being indoctrinated. Some would argue, I would argue socialized. Others argue indoctrination since they were toddlers, right? But even they would be like, nah, I mean, that's on me if I do that. And they're kids. Kids.
That's called education and enlightenment.
So can I respond?
Please,
I'm not a feminist, so I don't align with feminist thought, but I am a therapist. So I do understand the dynamics that are at play, like on both ends. So I understand. I would not say that I don't understand why people blame the system, because I think the narrative within the dominant society is to blame us for the things that we do. And I think a lot of times the dominant society is not to pay attention to the system. So I think what we're trying to do is to infuse the fact that no, we're not making excuses. Like, this stuff is real. The system really does have things in place that are designed to trap us and keep us at the bottom. So I feel like if we're not acknowledging the fact that that counter narrative is out there, and we're having to give meaning and explanation to the decisions that we do within our communities and in our lives, we have to be able to have both of these conversations and acknowledge the fact that there is a resounding narrative that also says that we as Black people try to blame the system.
Right. So, and if I could interject, and the reason why I say that is, and anyone who's had conversations with single mothers and their children are in trouble with the law, in and out of jail, right? They're habitual criminals, miscreants to the core. You will always hear the mother from the child being an early age making excuses for the child's behavior, right? I mean, Monika, you know, one of my children's mom does that all the time, right? Like, and that can stay between me and you. So it's like, what? You're not helping the child by doing this. And that's why I said at the end of the day, I'm about empowering Black people, helping our people restore ourselves to our traditional greatness as a free, proud, and productive people. And I know that simply stating, anytime something bad, you do something, is because of them folks does not help us.
But I don't think that is what was happening. I don't think I heard Brother Kenyatta say what you just said.
So let me say this. Now, I apologize for cutting you off, but I know him personally. So I know that's what he's about.
Oh, okay.
And I know him personally. I've known
that's
him
what he was saying
for about 7 years.
Oh, okay.
Literally, I've known him for 7 years. I've been to Chicago on several occasions. I've known the man for 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to give you
the whole nine. And so that's why Wisdom Never Sleeps and a lot of other Black people who really want to see the Black community do better say this is race hustling, because we know that there are a number of individuals in our community who purport themselves to be leaders, but actually aren't really doing anything to help the Black community. what they tend to do is they tell black people what they want to hear. It's never your fault. It's all them. Right? We know there have been a number of individuals in our community that will remain nameless. Once they find themselves in precarious situations, but they aren't delivering what they've promised, they start pandering to women.
Yes.
Right? We've seen these things.
They build their channels off of women and race hustling.
Knowing and giving them advice that men know is nonsensical. We know this is the most.
Or they don't live themselves, actually.
Okay.
The thing is this.
Well, I didn't know the backstory of that, so.
But the thing is this: when you hear it a lot, you hear it right away.
Your perspective is important, Monica.
It is. But my thing is this: when you've heard it so many years and so often, you hear it right away. And the way you can tell is that's always their answer is about the system. The we that know says, yes, it's a system in place. We know this. We know when laws are coming that's going to affect us, when they are really talking about helping someone else, it's really going to affect. I know how it works. The problem with how do we can never have a revolution without any personal, collective accountability for decisions we make individually or as a group. Right. That's never discounting the system. It's just like saying, you know what? Every day I drive this road and I see the same person right here, big man. I don't know when they're going to jump out, and I see them all the time. Do I stop to entertain them every single time? Or do I finally keep my window rolled up and keep going, because entertaining them gets me nowhere? It takes from me, my time, my money, my energy, whatever it is, I have to make a decision. It's just like, okay, if I'm walking behind, as a Monica, right? If I'm walking behind you and you drop something out of your wallet, am I going to be an honest man and say, oh, miss, hold on, you dropped this? Or I'm just going to take it and say, hey, the world owed me this. I'm not thinking about you, who is a sister who looks in my complexion. Is that making sense? We still make decisions because everything that look like you find is sometimes set up just like the guns are, the drugs are. You make a decision to pick them up or not. So I can make a decision to give you what you dropped. Or I can say, hey, this is for me. She didn't need this. And it could be your $1,000 rent payment or $1,000 car payment. You understand what I'm saying? Or you going to the grocery store for your family. I don't know that. I think I got a windfall. And I'm watching. You wasn't out of place. I didn't find this in some obscure place. I saw you drop it. And so we think in other words, it's like this. I was talking to Jim the other day, he getting a divorce. He was asking me some questions. And I said, well, have you first separated? He said, well, no, we still live in the same house. I said, okay, so you have separate quarters. No, we still sleep in the same bed. I said, well, how are you getting a divorce? The judge going to ask you those questions. And you got a teenage kid, they're going to ask them, is mom and dad living? You can stay separated in the separate household because you may not can afford at that point, but you got to have separate quarters. And they still in the same bed. And I said, but this is what reminds me of us as a collective people. We say we see what the people are doing to us, but we don't want to move forward. We don't want to separate. We don't want to divorce it. We want to still be convenient, but say we are separate.
Well, the thing is, I don't think the answer is this individual responsibility that you all keep saying. I don't think that's the answer. I understand that that's important, but I think it's so much more than that, because the reality is, like with the clip that you just showed from Judge Mathis, or kind of Brother Wisdom, what you're saying, the points that you all are making, that's what conservative news says about Black people. Like you can hear Candace Owens make these same talking points. So when I hear you all talk, it's like, what is so different between what you are saying and what Candace Owens says to the community? Because it sounds like the same rhetoric.
So I'm glad you asked that question, Monica. I mean, you know, you're always on fire when you come on my channel. That's why you're always welcome, right? So,
sorry, I have to interject. I got to go. My patient's coming back.
Okay, no problem. Appreciate you. I hope you subscribe and you're welcome here anytime.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up to everyone who's watching. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Smash that thumbs up button. Smash the like button. Subscribe. Make sure you hit the notification bell. So to answer your question, actually, when we look at the history of Black intellectual thought, Black politically ideological thought, there are some similarities between Black conservatives and Black nationalists, particularly to focus on personal responsibility. Conservatives call it personal responsibility. Nationalists call it agency of self-determination. The difference is in terms of the argument of how we solve these problems. Most conservatives argue to solve this problem, you have to adopt this white middle class values, so on and so forth. The Pan-Africanists make the assertion that no, the solution is to restore ourselves to an African-centered ethos, right? So we both tend to be able to because we are both able to identify the problem, but our remedy or solution to the problem is where the difference is.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to call that out because at face value, the talking points sound exactly the same. You would have to go down to the level deeper of what you just said to really analyze, like, what is your solution? What are you advocating for Black people? What are you saying is the thing that we need to move forward in the culture? So I would just say, based off the point that you just said, to anyone that's listening, if you do hear these two talking points that sound very similar, always go a level deeper to ask that question.
And for example, and I've discussed this on my channel before, that there was a situation where I got into a physical altercation 13 years ago, and I beat the brother up, unfortunately, pretty bad. And I think I shared this with you, Sister Monica. They had the whole block cordoned off. The U.S. Marshals were at my door. And Brother Maha, I called him like, yo, man, can you see they got the whole block cordoned off? He said, look, man, I would do it, but you need to get your ish together. What are you doing? Right. So there was he was holding me accountable. There was some Kucha Shakalia self-determination there. And me beating up that dude, I actually believe I was defending myself. I know I was defending myself, but it wasn't because of an overarching system of white hegemony. But now what I did find problematic was the fact that when the detective called me and asked me, did I want to give a statement? I said, absolutely, I'm willing to give a statement. I talked to my attorney. We could show up 8 a.m. Monday morning. They didn't wait, and they then put out the warrant. Next thing I'm doing, I'm sitting in jail. We can argue that point, right? But in terms of me choosing to whoop dude's ass, guilty as charged, right? So, and like I said, so once again, as Brother Wisdom Never Sleep stated, as Westside Mike stated in the comments, and as he stated the last time we did our show, the fact that there's no focus on agency, no focus on self-determination, as the Black people are impotent. That's a narrative that was created about us during the Holocaust of enslavement, coming out of enslavement, after Reconstruction. That was the reason given by most boxing aficionados, right, that Jack Johnson would lose his bid for the heavyweight championship of the world, because Black men and Black people are yellow belly. They're cowardly, right? They don't have the modus operandi or cultural DNA to actually be able to overcome arduous tasks and situations. Now we know, based on adaptive vitality, that's the furthest thing from the truth, right? But the narrative, but the system, right, takes away from agency. It takes away from adaptive vitality. In fact, in the course that I'm teaching, African American history, right, to 1877, and African American history from 1877 to the present, one of the core themes in the course is adaptive vitality, ingenuity, the ability to adjust to changing circumstances without losing substance or essence. We don't hear that in those conversations from individuals who are feminist leaning. I know this because I stated before, and I have Black Feminist Thought, the book right here, 30th anniversary edition, right here. So it's not like I'm capping here. This is the literature, right? And this is a problem because you don't help anyone. As I told you, when I beat that guy up, Dr. Sway called me. Hey, come on down here. I want to talk to you. He cursed me out for a full 45 minutes in his office. What the bleep is wrong with you? We doing all this work with you. We had you hosting a Kwanzaa celebration, doing a youth harambe with young people in Arlington Courts projects, so on and so forth. And you out here beating someone up, sending them in the hospital. You know how that make us look as a community? And you part of the Black Culture Festival. You on the board, and you, right? I couldn't say, man, it was because of white folk, Dr. Tway. I couldn't tell Barbara Crow that. That's the problem.
They made me angry because of what's going on in my neighborhood. They told me I was talking white because of my education.
We can't ignore that. Like, that's a lived reality for a lot of people. It might not make sense logically. Like, I don't think it's a one-to-one connection. Like, I did this simply because of that. But I do think that there are dynamics in the community that it's not causal, it's correlated. There's a correlated relationship between the things that we experience in our community and the actions that we take. So I don't think that we can negate the fact that there's this relationship. And I think what happens is, if we miss the opportunity to make that connection, it might not have made you do it, but it was a contributing factor that led to your psychology as to why you did it. That feeling of loss, the feeling of not having connection, the feeling of being poor, not wanting to connect with things in your community that reminded you of what you came from, feeling like you had to prove yourself as a man, or that you didn't want to be seen as weak or taken advantage of. Like, that psychology that is cultivated within our community, that is a product of racism, white supremacy, like, that's an indirect result that we have to deal with.
Well, if I could, Monica, I will say it had nothing to do with being seen as weak, because I actually told the guy in front of the whole team, whatever I did to offend you, I apologize. So there was okay. It was, and when dude tried me, I was just like, you know what? Murder she wrote. Murder she wrote. I was being honest, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, not that, but I would say maybe not that, but the anger that you carried at that age, to where you didn't have the self-control, like you weren't able to reel yourself in or pull yourself back, and you did a lot of things without thinking things through. It was a lot of impulsive behaviors.
No, but it wasn't though. Like, no, so very quickly, just for the viewers, what ended up happening was the dude told me after the play was over that he was going to kick my derriere, right? So I literally grabbed my gear and said, I'm out of here. He ran me down at my truck, swung on me, and I got him out of there like Javante Tank Davis. This is actually what happened, right? I hit dude 3 times, dropped him, I broke his nose, eye socket, jaw, and sinus cavity. They picked him up, put him in a car, took him to the hospital, and then he told the police that I jumped on him for no reason. Okay. So I had no idea. So it wasn't impulse control.
It was impulsive, Bakari. That's what I'm trying to get you to understand. What happened when you made that decision, when Barbara Crow and Dr. Tway brought you into their office, they broadened your scope to help you not be so impulsive. You didn't consider Kwanzaa. You didn't consider any of the stuff that Dr.
I did. That's why I apologized to the guy in front of everyone.
No, I'm saying when you took the action, that what you had did,
he
all the things
me. He attacked me. He followed me to the vehicle in the parking lot. That's why.
I hear you, but in that moment, you didn't make a different choice, considering that you were doing Kwanzaa, considering that Dr. Tway had been working with you. None of that stuff stopped you from punching him in the face.
I had to defend myself. It's called self-defense.
Okay.
It literally was.
But the moment you supposed got beat up and go say, I
was so upset because
why was he upset with you then?
No, so because it made him look bad because I beat dude up so bad. You know what I mean?
So why didn't you think about that before you beat him up? That it was going to make the elders and the community look bad?
Wait, real quick. I did. That's why I apologized to the guy. And when he told me he was going to beat me up, I grabbed my gear and I left and went straight to my vehicle in the parking lot, and he ran me down. Like, this literally is what happened. So, and I was pissed off because when the detectives went to the football team and asked them what happened, because of no one wants to talk to the police, no one would validate my story that the guy attacked me. But luckily,
go ahead.
But luckily, because the guy had an extensive rap sheet, the grand jury didn't indict me, and my felony felonious assault charge, they lowered it to a misdemeanor.
What did Dr. Tway want you to do in that moment?
He never told me. He just cursed me out.
Because you made them look bad?
Well, until he found that, like, my dad did the same thing until he found out that no, this guy actually ran me down, chased me to my car, and then attacked me. Then my dad was like, oh, well, you were defending yourself. And I was like, yeah. Look, I did everything I could to diffuse the situation. I apologized to this guy in front of everyone. He said, well, I know you're going to apologize to me because you ain't nothing but a B. You know what?
So why'd you get chastised about it then if it was self-defense?
I'm sorry?
Why'd you get chastised about it if it was self-defense?
No, they didn't know it at the time.
They didn't know the self-defense.
They thought it was just the old Bakari from what? When he was 21, just jumping on someone.
Oh, okay.
There's no man that's going to chastise another man for defending himself.
I'm out of here. And he literally ran me down in the parking lot and confronted me.
Wrong.
I know.
Okay.
Now the other stuff I had did, I was wrong. Like when I had planned to rob that restaurant, wrong. When I committed that Grand Theft Auto, wrong. When I engaged in those 2 B&Es, wrong. When I engaged in selling drugs, wrong. But that was the one situation where I wasn't in the wrong. But dude went to the police, made up a story, and when the detectives went to the football team and asked them what happened, no one wanted to talk to the police. And one of my homeboys who was on the team but had to quit the team because had a family he had to work was like, that's really messed up because I know what happened because the head coach told me you were actually defending yourself. So I could, like I said, that was the situation where I was actually defending. I'm not gonna let somebody kick my ass just because I'm a Pan-Africanist.
Of course, yeah. That makes sense.
You know what is really happening, because when you brought up the Candace Owens and stuff like that, and said we sound like some of those talking points, but we can hear the narrative on a lot of the other side when a lot of Black people talk. The problem I have with everything with that is we as a collective body of people, we always seem to be making decisions based on the white people on both sides who writes and keep the system going. That's the problem that I have. If you hear us talking about certain specifics where, yes, we understand this is happening, we understand this could be part of it, but there's a point in the life where there's got to be some accountability of the decisions that we make as a collective people, not just the individual, but the collective, because the individual affects the collective as well. But when we start with, oh, there you go, sounding like them, and always talking about it's Black people's fault. I never said it's Black people's fault. I said accountability for the decisions you reach at any given time. So even, yes, there's a system in place. There's things in place. We seem to be falling for what makes us feel a certain way versus what is right for us. And that keeps us divided because we was here breaking up families on see which white man gonna be the new slave master. That's sickness to me. Sickness. Which old white man is gonna run you in the system? And you breaking up families arguing over white folks that you say is against you. But you arguing and breaking up your Black family over Biden or Trump. That's crazy to me. That's a sickness to me. You cannot say we're in a system so bad, but you will be so mad with me if I say, so what are you going to get for your vote? What are you asking for your vote? There you go. You know he's racist. Now you're a Trump supporter. Because I said we as a people should be finally asking, what are we going to get? Because it may be our last chance to even ask that question. I didn't say the system wasn't in place. I didn't even say I said we need to say, what are you going to give us for our vote? Us, people. Okay? And we didn't do that. We broke up families and friendships and everything over 2 old white men. That's a sickness to me. And don't care who makes a comment or whatever. Nobody can come to me and say, brother, you know what? That's right. We sick if we keep fighting over who white man gonna lead us to the next laws that's gonna make us bad or worse. Because if you believe that it's all white, why are you fighting for the lesser of 2 evils? You shouldn't want no evil. You got enough evil in your own families, own hoods and stuff. So we should be saying, hey guys, let's get together, even with all our differences. We got to finally act as one body to get at least forward and then work on our differences when we get ahead as a collective. We don't want to do that. But I'm tired of people making the race hustle, the feminist hustle, and all these things. And what I will say to this on the feminist thing, the feminists marched and fought so hard when the white men mainly was suppressing them from certain things they wanted. They brought in the black women for that and everything. But now the white man has figured that if he just classified as a woman, he can start over dominating, taking back everything that the feminine got from him by wearing the wig. And that's what nobody's talking about. That's because the ones that's really winning these awards and getting all the notoriety, they're white.
Well, I'm gonna do a show on that. So I'm gonna need you to save a little bit because we're gonna do a show on that.
Okay, but what I'm saying is we got to stop fighting for which white people is going to run the country on our behalf when neither one of us giving anything. And those that do, that want us accountable, at least one side says, okay, you need to do for yourself, okay, what you want from us to help you do for yourself. We think that's racist. The other says they're racist because they want you to do for yourself, but we will govern you, but we won't do nothing for you. We'll give you little subsidies, but we'll let your towns and everything run down while we sit up here and live great. That we just have to stop that in this voting thing. If we can't get something and come together and say, as a body, let's stop all this other stuff. What can we get for us as a body of people, and then sort out, move ourselves forward. Let's stop following their bushes, and let's stop following what they want us to do. Ask for stuff as a collective body for once, just once, and then sort out the rest later.
Sister Monica, do you want to provide a retort or extend to another perspective? And if you're watching, make sure you hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And if you want to tap in and be part of the conversation, I'm going to put the link in the chat below. The link is also in the description. We're going to go for probably another 20 minutes, and then we're going to call it a night. Sister Monica.
No, I don't have a retort, but I won't be able to stay on either. But I just think that this is a much needed conversation. I appreciate everybody's feedback, input. I think we have a lot of different conversations that we can have based off of how this conversation spun off today. So I'm looking forward to that, but I don't have anything else to share.
Okay. Any final thoughts from Miss Reality, and I need you to tap in as well, Miss Reality. But the question Miss Reality asks is, what should we ask for?
Who is that question to? For anybody?
I would make the presumption that it's to Brother Wisdom Never Speaks. Wisdom Never Sleeps, I'm sorry.
One, we should ask for what is it that we need as a collective people. And it's been a lot of stuff out there about that. Whether we're talking about, we're solution oriented versus just problem response or reactive of a problem. And so a lot of times for many, many years, there's been a lot of steps and solutions. Dr. Claude Allison and all the people that the movement have talked about in history, they've already laid out what you should ask for because it's the things you need, not what we just want. What do we need to move ourselves up a notch or 2 notches? What do we need? That's what we ask for. But we're only going to get there by talking from a common goal, not from a broken place, not from that person, oh, well, Tariq Nasheed, he's the best, so I'm going to follow him, and I'm not going to follow this. No, that can't happen. You can't have people that are supposed to be leading you, but dividing you. The people need to come in the same space and say, okay, I know I got followers, you got followers and stuff, and they listen to me. But even if you don't want one speaker, let everybody come to the table, talk about at least one point first, and everybody go back to their organization, to their podcast, and talk about the same thing that we're going to ask for. Period.
So, and Miss Reality says, I'm just hearing him say vote Republican.
No, I'm not saying vote Republican. I said, wherever you give your vote, you ask for something in return before you give it. And that's with both parties. And when people went to that side, like Ice Cube, they attacked him. Like somebody else, they attacked him. We can't do that when someone going for your behalf. So this is the mindset when we say ask for something for the vote. We first say, "Oh, you want to vote Republican." That's not what. If that's what you heard, that's what you programmed to hear. That's not what I'm saying. I was saying to everybody, when you vote,
Right.
what are you getting in return for your vote, regardless of who you vote for? If you give nothing, you do not give a vote. Let them play out their own thing. Don't be the savior like they said, you saved us again, and we give you nothing. Stop doing that.
And so, Short ENT says, first we need commitment, especially from the groups with a lot of influence, such as Black fraternities and sororities with 2 million members. I don't think the Black fraternities and sororities are the solution. One, these are Black organizations that are rooted in Greek culture.
Yes.
Right? If you've ever been on a college campus, I know I have been, and I work in higher ed, the Black fraternities and sororities tend to fight each other on a regular basis.
Always.
Literally, just because, so I don't think the solution will be there. Also, when we see them engaging in political stunts, as Sister Monica called it, it tends to be without a clear political agenda. So that's just what, twerking at rallies, strolling to the polls.
Yeah.
There's no actual agenda. So they might have a lot of influence, but I would make the argument that influence oftentimes, I would argue the influence is negative in nature. It's not progressive in nature. It's not helping us reach a particular goal, but it's actually rooted in us almost, to some would argue, the rat spinning on the wheel, making us believe that we are engaging in some type of progress or some type of movement forward, when in actuality we aren't. In fact, one of the things I never pledged was one because it was rooted in Greek, right? Greek culture.
Mm-hmm.
The second issue was there are some Black African-centered fraternities and sororities, but they weren't any at my undergraduate institution. Then the third issue, as I said before, the brothers and sisters were extremely immature. They were fighting with each other, and I said, "Hey, I'm leaving the hood. I'm trying to get away from this type of behavior. I'm not going to come to college and associate with people who want to act like they're a thug in college when I was actually living that life before I got here."
Right.
So I think that's something to be cognizant of as well, right? So P Funk 100 says, what do we need? That's a good question.
Well,
what do we need?
We need to stop accepting.
Get that algorithm. Just get me in the algorithm.
We need to stop allowing the people they put in front of us that look like us to give us misdirection. Mm-hmm. We need to stop allowing them, because they have a status, they're an actor, they're an actress, they're a singer, they're a rapper, they're this, they're a politician, they're news media. That don't make them on our side. They're paid for and bought for by the establishment. Right. And you see most of them today. Let me really go here. If you really want to even think about if they really want to do something for you, see who they're going to bed with every night, who they're married to. That's one thing. That's one inclination. If they're married to the person that looks like the oppressor that you hate, they can say something okay, but they're not going to go all the way in on behalf of their people, because they still have to be married to or sleeping with or partner with the other side. That's one thing. The other thing is, if they can't be honest with you and they just say, you know what, right, is the system, it's the white man, then they're not helping you either. They're really not. They're only doing things to make you feel a certain way, to guide you and misdirect you, and which keeps you at a loss. So that's really what's happening. Stop looking for the savior and be part of the saving. There's no one individual for this whole thing. We are a collective people, and we must move in a collective way. No matter how bad there's Chinese and Boninese and whites and Italians and all, they have issues too. But guess what? They still will move as a body when necessary, and they can deal with the other issues anyway.
Mm-hmm. And just real quick before we close out, Short ENT states he agrees with my position. Yeah, I can even recall when I was on campus, there was issues in the Black community. I would go to the Divine Nine and to reach out to them, and nothing. They had a lot of influence, but when it came to actually doing something to help Black people, they were, yes, he said that they were organized to have step shows on campus, but they wouldn't organize to engage in any type of revolutionary, progressive actions to the benefit of the Black student body. So this is something we see on campus. And many would argue that this is something that we find once again out in society as well. So something to be cognizant of. But we're going to close out. I appreciate you all tapping in. This show went 3-some hours. We're going to be back. I'm thinking maybe next on Wednesday. I'm going to look to do 2 shows a week, Wednesday and Sunday. But I definitely appreciate you all tapping in, having an intelligent Black conversation about what we can do as African people to move forward. And as I said before, 2 things can be right at the same time. But I do apologize to my viewers for the contentious conversation, but I can't allow someone to come on my channel and take over the conversation and overtalk me. It just doesn't happen. As I said it before, I've never in my life walked into another man or woman's home and told them how they were going to do things.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way.
Right. Right.
So until next time, appreciate you all. Make sure you hit the like button. Get me an algorithm. Until next time, y'all know what to do. Peace.
Ohio.
OHIO. I appreciate you, brother.